Space is quiet when death comes slowly. Far beyond major trade lanes and diplomatic borders, at the rim of an uncharted cluster, a lone star pulsed with growing desperation. Its light flickered like a candle losing oxygen. Its chromosphere billowed in erratic surges. Stellar winds faltered, but no explosion followed, no nova, no collapse. The star simply began to disappear. The USS Enterprise detected it first. The ship's long-range sensor arrays registered energy loss at a scale that contradicted every known astrophysical model. No debris, no radiation spike, no neutrino burst, no gravitational shift. A sun was dying without releasing the energy that defined its existence. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood quietly at the main view screen, his sharp eyes reflecting the red dwarf's last breaths. The Enterprise had arrived only 27 minutes earlier, rerouted from its original mission at the request of a Federation Science Council whose advisors used the word impossible more than their pride tolerated. He clasped his hands behind his back. His voice was soft, but held the weight of every unexpected phenomenon he had ever encountered. This star is vanishing like a flame submerged in water. Commander Data, manning the science console, worked with the speed of 1,000 analysts. His fingers moved in micro-precise motions across multiple interfaces. Correct, Captain. Stellar matter is not being ejected. It is not collapsing inward. It is simply missing. The loss is not energetic. It is consumptive. Picard raised an eyebrow. Consumed? By what? Space is not capable of devouring mass on this scale. Worf, looming at tactical, scanned for hostile vessels or cloaked technologies. His instincts sought attackers, predators, or weapons disguised as cosmic anomalies. There are no ships within range, no movements, no artificial emissions. Data nodded. The consumption is not mechanical. It appears photonic, though not in any known manner. The star's electromagnetic energy is decreasing without exchangeable output. It is being removed without radiation dispersal. Commander Riker leaned against the railing above him. So, something is eating light. In a manner of speaking, yes. That manner of speaking did not sit well with anyone on the bridge. Picard stared at the star, its luminous skin peeling away layer by fading layer. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with space. Science explained much, but sometimes even science whispered danger. Lieutenant Barclay, temporarily working on long-range research under Geordi LaForge's oversight, looked up from his console suddenly, his nervous voice cracking. Captain, the star is not the only source losing energy. Something is reflecting plasma just outside the exosphere, motionless, approximately 180,000 kilometers away. On screen, Picard ordered. The image changed from the dying star to a vast field of distorted light. Not a ship, not debris, not a celestial body. Something blackened the star's glare, absorbing wavelengths instead of reflecting them. It looked like a void swimming inside another void. Magnify. The resolution increased. At its center, there was movement. Not mechanical, but biological. A shape, humanoid, suspended in space without environmental protection, shielded by a thick shell of ionized plasma swirling around her body like a cocoon of burning wind. Dr. Beverly Crusher gasped softly over the comm channel from sickbay. Captain, that figure is alive. I'm reading a heartbeat, strong, superhumanly strong. The plasma is acting as an energy buffer, protecting her. Or feeding her. Commander Riker frowned. Feeding her? She's absorbing stellar energy? It appears reciprocal, Data added calmly. She is losing energy as the star is losing energy. The process is mutual. She is either consuming or being consumed by the dying star. Possibly both. Picard's jaw tightened. "Doctor, can she survive extraction?" Crusher hesitated. "Possibly. But bringing her aboard without preparation could irradiate the entire ship. Her body is generating cosmic energy, magnitudes beyond our shielding tolerances. If we beam her directly without proper isolation, she could overload containment fields or harm the crew just by breathing," Riker muttered. "That's a new medical complication, breathing as a hazardous event." The plasma cocoon shifted. The humanoid figure inside twitched, barely perceptible, but enough to make every sensor pulse like an anxious heartbeat. She was stirring. Picard made a decision with careful weight. "Prepare a secure medical isolation unit, triple shielding, modify environmental controls to withstand high-energy particle emissions. Mr. Data, assist Dr. Crusher in calculating containment if she is transported," Worf interrupted sharply. "Captain, we cannot allow an unknown entity with that level of radiation to board this ship. It may not be alive. It may be a weapon. Starfleet protocol demands containment, not rescue." Picard did not flinch. "Worf, if someone lies dying in the cold vacuum of space, Starfleet protocol demands compassion above fear, but caution will guide that compassion." Worf lowered his eyes slightly, accepting the balance. Data stood. "I will assist in sickbay." Picard nodded. "Make it so." As Data exited, the bridge fell into a tense quiet. The star continued dissolving in the corner of the screen, its light consumed by the same energy that sustained the woman. Communications opened again. Dr. Crusher's voice returned, more serious. "Captain, whoever she is, her biology is not responding like anything human. Her heart is generating photon bursts. She's radiating cosmic power. If we don't stabilize her soon, she might either die or detonate." Riker's eyebrows shot up. "Those are two very different ends," Crusher replied sharply. "That's the problem. We can't predict which way she'll go." Picard turned back to the screen. The humanoid's body flickered brighter. The plasma cocoon thinned. The dying star diminished further, growing unstable around her. He spoke with the gravity of a man who had seen the universe break its own rules. "Beam her aboard. Now. Transporter room 3. Maximum isolation." Everyone on the bridge held their breath as the order was relayed. The transporter chief's calm but strained voice cut through over comms, energizing. A faint hum filled the channel. The screen showed the star fading into ashen red. The plasma around the humanoid thinned like smoke at dawn. The chief whispered, "There's interference, adjusting phase variance, compensating." Then his voice rose. "Captain, I've got her. She's materializing now." In sickbay, alarms screamed, radiation filters overloaded, shielding surged. Then, silence. Crusher's voice returned. "She's here. She's on the biobed. She's alive. But she's volatile." Picard exhaled slowly. "We're coming." When Picard arrived in sickbay, he saw the woman up close. Blonde hair, scorched at the edges like strands of burning silk. Her skin glowed faintly, pulsing with residual starfire. She wore what resembled a flight suit, blackened and fissured like cracked meteorite plating. Her breathing was deep and forceful, as if the universe itself fed her lungs. Her eyelids flickered with erratic light. Beneath them, her pupils seemed to ignite and fade like stars swallowed and reborn. She looked almost human. Almost. Crusher checked instruments rapidly. She's stabilizing, but she's absorbing ambient energy. The lights in this room are feeding her. Even the biobed's electronics are reacting to her cells. Data analyzed the readings. Captain, her physiology includes an energy conversion mechanism far beyond human capacity. She is not sustained by cellular metabolism, but by cosmic radiation and photon absorption. Her body is generating more internal energy than an entire warp core manifold. Picard spoke quietly. And if she wakes up frightened? Crusher answered, without looking away. This room won't survive the reaction. The woman's respiration deepened. Her fingers twitched. Her heart rate surged like a storm. The biobed monitors spiked. A warning siren blared. Data leaned in. She is awakening. The woman's eyes snapped open. Golden light exploded outward. The explosion of light was not an outward blast, not a plasma wave tearing through bulkheads. It was a flare restrained out of instinct, not design. Every surface in sickbay reflected a sudden golden burn, shadows driven momentarily to the corners. The shields around the isolation biobed flared blue, compensating as their emitters groaned from the surge. Monitors flickered, one overloaded and died with a soft pop. The woman did not move at first. Her eyes were fully open now, irises flooded with molten gold, not glowing around the edges or shimmering faintly, but burning from within like someone had condensed a sun and trapped it behind her pupils. She lay still, chest rising and falling in harsh, controlled breaths. Her gaze darted quickly around the room, taking everything in with the sharpness of a pilot waking mid-descent. Her voice, when it came, was raw and hoarse, as if scraped against solar wind. "Where is it?" Crusher tensed, glancing instinctively toward Picard. He stepped forward with measured calm, hands visible, posture careful but unafraid. "You're aboard the Federation starship Enterprise," he said gently. "You were found near a star undergoing unexplained energy loss. We brought you aboard to help you." Her eyes snapped to him. The light in them brightened with sudden urgency. "The star?" Her fingers curled tight against the bed. "Did it die?" Data replied analytically. "The star experienced massive photonic and mass depletion prior to your removal from its proximity. Its luminosity has fallen below." She cut him off sharply. "Did it go nova? Was there an explosion? Did the system survive?" Picard glanced briefly at Data, who adjusted his phrasing. "No supernova was observed. The star's energy was consumed. The system is now dark." She closed her eyes briefly, a flash of pain crossing her features, quickly smothered. She exhaled through clenched teeth. Then I was too late. Around her, the force field flickered as her energy flux spiked and receded with her emotions. Crusher checked her readings. Energy output is rising and dropping in waves. She's linked emotionally to her power levels. If she loses control... The woman opened her eyes again and focused on the shield between herself and the crew. Her voice steadied, pulling itself together with sheer discipline. "You need to reinforce your containment. I'm not stable right now. Increase shielding, reduce ambient radiation, kill half the lights in this room." Crusher hesitated only a moment. "Computer, dim sickbay lighting 40%. Reroute extra shielding power to the isolation field." The room darkened. The shield shimmered more solidly. The woman's glow eased a fraction. Data studied her thoughtfully. "You understand advanced containment procedures and energy regulation. Are you familiar with starship engineering?" She shook her head slightly. "Not your kind of starship. But I know what happens when I lose control near delicate systems." She finally looked down at her own hands, flexing her fingers slowly. Light bled through the cracks of her skin like a suppressed flare. Picard kept his tone soft, but direct. You mentioned being too late. Too late for what exactly? What happened to that star? She stared through him for a moment, as if focusing on a memory hanging in the air. It wasn't natural, she said. The collapse. Something targeted that star, ate it, and it was using me as a bridge. A bridge, Data repeated. Between what and what? Between its hunger and the star's core. Crusher frowned. Are you saying you weren't the cause of the star's collapse? Her jaw clenched. No, I was the battery. Her eyes moved to Picard again, gauging him, assessing whether he could handle the truth she carried. She found steadiness in his gaze and continued. It's a photonic predator. It travels in subspace, feeds on high-density energy sources, magnetars, pulsars, stars, people like me. Worf stepped closer to the security console at the wall. His instincts sharpened. People like you? Her attention shifted to him. Her gaze softened in regret when she saw the burned hand of the medic, previously injured, now fully healed. People who absorb energy. People who glow. She closed her eyes for a moment. I thought I could stop it, draw its focus, starve it. I underestimated how strong it had become. Riker folded his arms. And it used you to get more? She nodded once, her expression hardening. It latched onto me, used my connection to the star to siphon more efficiently. The more I fought it, the more it learned how to feed. It started collapsing the star from the inside out. She swallowed. I tried to overload my own output, break the link. Next thing I remember, I'm here. Data processed this rapidly. You were in binary state, he observed. She looked at him with slight surprise that he recognized the term. His explanation followed. Your current readings match an extrapolation of enhanced cosmic power states from certain theoretical models. She gave the faintest hint of a smile. That's one way to say it. Picard stepped a little closer, careful not to cross the threshold of her field. You're saying this entity can move between stars? That it can cross distances through subspace? Yes, she confirmed. It's drawn to energy, but it's not mindless. It learns, it adapts, and if it's not stopped, it will move from star to star like stepping stones. Systems, clusters, galaxies. The room felt smaller suddenly. Crusher spoke up. We need more details. Have you encountered it before? Carol Danvers, she said, quietly, almost as an afterthought. Captain Marvel, some people call me. And yes, this isn't the first time, but this is the first time it almost turned me into a conduit instead of just prey. Her name hung in the air, meaningless to Federation records, but heavy with the weight of a reputation from somewhere else. Picard absorbed it all carefully. Captain Marvel. You come from another universe, another galaxy, another reality, she clarified. One where I'm used to cosmic threats showing up uninvited. I thought I knew how to handle them. She paused, looking at her glowing fingertips again. This one is different. Data tilted his head. Different how? It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't conquer. It only feeds. You can't outthink hunger. You can only redirect it or starve it. Worf's voice was low. Then we end it. Destroy it. Carol shook her head slowly. It's not that simple. It moves through subspace, out of phase with physical matter, until it anchors on a large energy source. Last time I hit it, I did more damage to the surrounding environment than to it. She looked down. There was a planet involved. The guilt in her voice said enough. Picard looked to Data. How long until the remnant star's collapse becomes complete? Data tapped several panels in quick succession. The star's mass has dropped to 18% of its original measure. At its current rate of depletion, it will become a cold remnant in approximately 16 hours. There are no inhabited planets in its immediate system, no colonies, no warp trails. Riker exhaled. Small favor, but Data was not done. The photonic signature we observed during the consumption is no longer localized. A similar subspace distortion is increasing in intensity within 6 light years of our current position. Worf checked tactical readings. Another star? Negative, Data replied. No stable star systems in that region. However, a Federation relay station operates at the edge of that sector. Its core contains a fusion reactor, powerful enough to be detected as a target. Crusher's eyes widened. A communication station running civilian and Starfleet traffic is about to look like dinner. Carol's gaze sharpened. How long do we have before it reaches that reactor? Data calculated with a microsecond pause. Based on previous shift movement, approximately 3 hours. Carol closed her eyes briefly. She inhaled once, then opened them again with renewed focus. You can't get those people out in time, she said. Not if it moves through subspace. By the time they see it, it'll already be inside their systems. Picard's mind raced through options. We can try to warn them, begin full evacuation protocols, but if the entity uses subspace corridors to travel, conventional escape routes may be compromised. Carol looked at him steadily. You need bait. The word landed heavily. Riker's jaw tightened. What are you suggesting? She answered without hesitation. You use me. You boost my signature so high that it can't ignore me. We draw it away from the relay station and toward a place we control. Somewhere with strong gravity, unstable matter, high radiation. We make a trap, Data considered quickly. A decaying white dwarf orbiting a neutron star could provide sufficient gravitational and electromagnetic interference to disrupt its feeding patterns. If we guide it there, we could theoretically compress its presence into a confined spatial pocket. Worf growled softly. Theoretically. Crusher stepped closer to Picard, whispering sharply. Captain, she's barely stable. Boosting her output could kill her, or provoke a reaction similar to a warp core breach. Carol met her eyes. If it kills me, the thing still follows the energy trail. If we set the trap right, my explosion becomes the trigger. Contain the blast inside a collapsed field, and you cage it. Crusher stared at her. That's your plan? Use yourself as a detonator? Carol's expression didn't waver. I've done worse. Picard watched her carefully. He had seen self-sacrifice before. He'd ordered people into danger to save many. He recognized both heroism and self-destruction when he saw them, and the line between the two was often thin. You said it learns, he reminded her. If we fail, we not only lose you, we teach it new tactics, our weapons, our strategies, our weaknesses. She nodded. That's why we have to get it right the first time. Riker spoke up. Captain, there might be a middle ground. Instead of using her as a bomb, we could modulate her energy output through our deflector systems. Turn her into a controlled lure rather than a full overload. She won't have to burn everything she has. Just enough to outshine the station. Data agreed. We could integrate her energy emission with the main deflector dish, shaping the signal to mimic a star's internal profile rather than a single reactor. That would make her a more appealing target and give us control over intensity. Carol listened, then nodded slowly. That's better. Less suicidal. still dangerous. Crusher folded her arms. And what happens to you if we push your energy through our systems and overload them? Our ship isn't built to channel a living sun. Carol looked between them, weighing the options, her voice quiet but resolute. If we do nothing, the station dies, and the thing keeps feeding unchecked. If we move carefully, we can draw it away and maybe learn how to stop it for good. I'm not asking you to let me blow myself up for nothing. I'm asking you to trust that I know what I can handle. Picard met her gaze. Do you? She held his stare without flinching. I do now. He studied her for several seconds, searching for ego, recklessness, fatalism. He found only hard-earned resolve. He turned to the crew. Prepare to alter course for the relay station and for the decaying white dwarf in that sector. We give those people every chance. But our priority is not just their survival. It's making sure this predator doesn't keep treating our galaxy like an open buffet. Riker nodded, already issuing orders. Data returned to the science console. Worf coordinated long-range tactical sweeps. Crusher reluctantly began recalibrating biomed scanners to monitor Carol beyond normal operating parameters. Carol lay back on the biobed, eyes still glowing softly in the half-dark. She studied the ceiling, listening to the synchronized motion of a ship preparing to risk itself for strangers. She smiled faintly to herself. A crew that would move heaven and stars for people they'd never met. She recognized that kind of optimism. It reminded her of what she'd always fought for. The difference was that, this time, she wasn't fighting alone. The Enterprise altered course. With a subtle shift, the stars on the view screen angling as the ship accelerated to warp. The moment the engines engaged, the hum beneath the deck plates deepened, familiar to the crew, but resonating differently for the woman in sickbay. Carol felt the vibration through the biobed, a physical reminder that she was aboard a vessel not fueled by power, but guided by purpose. Crew teams mobilized quickly. Long-range communication channels opened. Evacuation alerts were already transmitting to the Federation relay station. But Data and Lieutenant Barclay made it clear that warning alone would not save them. The station was powered by a fusion core that would act as a beacon to the creature, whether the people fled or not. Shutting the core down entirely was impossible without hours of manual deconstruction. Even if they evacuated everyone, the monster would still come. It would learn, adapt, spread. In the medical bay, Carol sat upright now, monitoring her own readings with increasing familiarity. She moved her fingers across the console with experience she should not logically possess. Energy signatures, modulation frequencies, photonic thresholds. These were languages she understood not from study, but from survival. She traced her own oscillations across the panel, mapping fluctuations in her power output like a pilot reading atmospheric turbulence. Dr. Crusher hovered nearby, her concern barely contained beneath clinical focus. "You're recovering too quickly," she observed. "Cells aren't just stabilizing, they're adapting. I don't know if that's your biology or a response to the threat," Carol answered without looking up. "It's both. Power adapts to need. That's true for stars, reactors, and people." She paused, adjusting a waveform on screen. "The trick is knowing when to let power do its job and when to rein it in." Crusher watched her closely before responding. "And which do you think this is?" Carol lifted her hand slightly. A faint pulse of golden light flickered along her palm. Brief, contained, controlled. When it faded, she replied, This is a time to control. Crusher nodded slowly. Good. Because if you lose that control on this ship, even for a moment, you could ignite our warp core. Carol let out a breath that was almost a laugh. That's exactly why I'm not planning to lose it. Elsewhere, in engineering, Geordi LaForge and Data were recalibrating the deflector systems. They stood before the towering curvature of the main deflector dish displayed on a holographic schematic, rerouting conduits and adjusting energy transfer protocols. The dish was designed to project subspace pulses or gravitational beams, but channeling a living power source was something entirely different. Geordi wiped his brow, not from exertion, but from the anxiety of precision. If her energy surges too fast, every system in this room fries or explodes. If we dampen her too much, we won't get a strong enough signal for the creature to follow. Data nodded, fingers blurring across the console. Efficiency of modulation depends on emotional stability as well as biological restraint. Therefore, we must design buffering protocols that accommodate unpredictability while preventing overload. Geordi blinked. Are you saying we need a system that can handle mood swings? In essence, yes. He sighed. Great. We're building a cosmic power pacifier. Data paused thoughtfully. That is an inaccurate metaphor. This is more akin to a neural translator for energy expression. Geordi smirked. Fine. A cosmic therapist. Data considered again. That metaphor is slightly more appropriate. In the corridor outside engineering, Latine Worf oversaw preparation teams in case the situation deteriorated to combat. Phaser arrays were set to wide dispersal, not narrow beam. Conventional energy weapons might feed the creature if misused, so every configuration was defensive, not offensive. Worf moved with calm discipline, instructing security officers to ready containment fields and deploy emergency barriers capable of isolating specific decks. A junior officer asked if they were preparing to fight the entity. Worf answered in his deep, steady tone, "We are preparing not to feed it." The young officer nodded, understanding immediately. Meanwhile, in the briefing room, Picard reviewed mission parameters with senior staff. Holographic models displayed the relay station, the decaying white dwarf, and Carol's projected energy output. The models shimmered with cascading probabilities. Riker leaned against the table, arms crossed. We need to position the Enterprise between the entity and the station. If we can modulate her energy output in short bursts, we can redirect its trajectory. Data added, correct. We will use the deflector to mimic the internal resonance of a young star, guiding the entity like a navigational lure toward the white dwarf. Once it enters the gravity field, we can deploy subspace interference bands to destabilize its hunting mechanism. Picard's voice sharpened. And once trapped, Data paused. Analysis indicates the creature will enter hibernation once energy intake is blocked. However, its dormancy will not be permanent. It may awaken again if exposed to strong photonic signals. Crusher frowned. Meaning if Carol ever regains her full power near it, Riker finished grimly. She'll be a feast waiting to happen. Picard weighed this heavily. We cannot let her become prey again, or bait without escape. He tapped the hologram, shifting the view. We must ensure that once it is trapped, it cannot follow her. That requires more than power. It requires shielding technologies it has never encountered. We must do this without teaching it adaptation strategies. Riker nodded, meaning no fancy tricks it can learn from. No exotic weapons, just a clean trap and a clean exit. Picard agreed. The stellar collapse and gravity field must do most of the work. He looked around the room. We act only to guide it, not to confront it. Back in sickbay, Carol tested her physical limits. She rose from the biobed and held out her arm. A low surge of energy pulsed along her forearm, barely bright enough to light her skin. She controlled the flare, let it dim, reignited it, then extinguished it again. Each pulse was softer than the last. She was holding back deliberately, training herself the way a diver learns to breathe underwater. Crusher observed. "You're not forcing the energy. You're negotiating with it." Carol nodded. "Power doesn't respond to force. It responds to understanding. You have to make it want to cooperate." Crusher raised an eyebrow. "Your powers require consent?" Carol's lips twitched, from both sides. There was a knock at the doorway. Data entered, holding a portable scanner. "We have completed preliminary deflector modification. We require your assistance to calibrate the resonance profile." Carol stepped forward, steadying herself. "Then let's tune your star-shaped fishing lure." Data glanced at her with curiosity. That metaphor is surprisingly accurate. As they headed toward engineering, Carol paused in the hallway, noticing something she had not before. The crew moved around her without fear. They nodded to her, but did not stare. They allowed her space, but did not avoid her. She was not an anomaly. She was not a weapon. She was not a marvel. She was simply Carol. She hadn't felt like just Carol in a long time. In engineering, she placed her hand on a modified interface connected to the deflector's frequency regulator. A calibrated metal panel cooled instantly beneath her palm as sensors adjusted to the temperature fluctuation from her cells. Geordi cleared his throat. "When you begin, don't try to overload anything. Just let a little power through. Think of it like humming rather than singing." Carol smiled faintly. "I'll try not to break your dish." She concentrated. A soft light traveled from her fingertips into the panel. The deflector dish responded with a faint oscillation, visible on the holographic display as a pulse expanding outward. The waveform matched her energy signature partially, then destabilized. The equipment hummed louder, then steadied as Carol eased her output. Data adjusted the controls. Increase energy randomness by 2%, lower amplitude by 7. Carol complied, her glow brightening just slightly. Energy flowed smoothly this time, neither spiking nor bleeding into volatile harmonic noise. Geordi studied the readout. "Good, keep it like that. You're doing fine." She nodded and maintained the level, her brow furrowed. The sensation was like balancing on a tightrope made of starlight. Too much push, and it snapped. Too little, and she would fall. After 40 seconds, Data withdrew his hand from the panel, satisfied. "That is optimal. We now possess a lure the entity cannot resist." Carol exhaled sharply and let the energy cease. It faded from her like breath-leaving lungs after a dive. She leaned on the panel for a moment. Crusher stepped forward, concerned. "Are you all right?" Carol nodded slowly. "I'm not used to going that slow." Geordi chuckled. "That was slow?" She shrugged. "For me, that's usually my warm-up." Data stored the readings. "Your restraint is remarkable." Carol shook her head. "No, my restraint is new. It's not something I used to do." Data tilted his head. "Learning restraint is itself an act of power." Carol paused, then offered a soft, genuine response. "I'm starting to get that." Before she could say more, Picard's voice echoed through the comm. "All senior officers to the bridge." Data, Crusher, Geordie, and Carol exchanged glances and headed toward the turbo lift. On the bridge, Riker stood at tactical. Sensors registered the distortion increasing. Worf reported a surge in subspace activity, rapid, erratic, predatory. Space bent on the main screen like fabric, pulled by invisible claws. Stars warped around a ripple growing larger by the second. It had found them. Carol walked to the center of the bridge, the gold in her eyes reflecting the distortion ahead. She spoke quietly, but with absolute certainty. "It's following my trail." Riker looked at Picard. "We lure it, we trap it, and we don't give it anything to learn from." Picard nodded. "Steady as she goes." Carol stared at the expanding void and whispered, "Not to the crew, but to the thing hunting her." "Come on then, let's finish this." The creature's arrival was not a roar. It was not a flash. It was not a violent burst through space. It was silence becoming aware. The stars distorted on the main view screen, bending into warped crescents, then dissolving as if photographed through fluid glass. Light didn't disappear. It recoiled. The vacuum itself seemed to tighten, condensing into an invisible presence that pulled reality inward. Sensors screamed without sound. The bridge lights flickered in sympathetic panic. The ship vibrated, not from turbulence, but from the tension of space-time being stretched thin. Data's voice cut through the static of malfunctioning displays. Subspace harmonics increasing exponentially. The entity is partially out of phase. It is transitioning into real space. Riker braced his hands on the tactical rail. How long until it fully breaches? Data's fingers flew. Based on resonance decay, approximately 33 seconds. Worf's jaw tightened. It is stalking us. Picard stepped forward, eyes locked on the screen. No, it is hunting. Carol watched with unblinking focus. Her breathing slowed. The golden light in her eyes dimmed to a contained ember as she stared through the distortion, unafraid. She recognized the shape before it even finished manifesting. Recognition wasn't comfort. It was challenge. She whispered, "It remembers me." The shape condensed. The distortion collapsed inward. The stars snapped back into clarity, and in their place, at the center of the dark convergence, floated something that was not a creature of flesh, but of hunger. It resembled shadow trapped behind glass, a swirling absence that devoured the light around it, twisting into elongated tendrils of darkness that writhed like limbs made of gravity. The void exhaled without breath, and signals died across half the console panels. Carol spoke evenly. "Don't fire, don't scan, don't react, let it look." Picard nodded sharply. "Helm, hold position, minimize all emissions. Riker, no active targeting. Data, passive sensors only. Worf, weapons on standby, safeties locked." Worf growled quiet protest. "We cannot." Picard's tone sliced through the tension, steady and commanding. "Locking safeties is protection, not surrender." Worf obeyed. The bridge held its breath as the creature hovered in the void. It did not strike, did not surge. It listened. Not with ears, but with detection more primal than perception. It tasted energy through the vacuum. It searched for the brightest flavor. Shields whispered with faint sparkles as its attention brushed against them. Carol stood still, aware that any shift, any surge of fear or force might call to it. Her power pulsed gently in her bloodstream, urging her to flare. She fought it like resisting the urge to gasp underwater. Data whispered, "Its resonance is aligning with local subspace. It is attempting to feed." Carol answered without turning her head. Not yet. It's sniffing. It's choosing. The ship trembled again as the creature slid closer, not flying, not swimming, but reforming its position by pulling itself along invisible fabric. It shifted shape like liquid shadow, flattening, condensing, then stretching again. Riker muttered. "What does it see?" Carol responded quietly. "Desire." It touched the Enterprise's shield with one tendril. The lights dimmed. Consoles went black momentarily. Crew members held their breath as the ship's heart seemed to falter. Then the creature withdrew, unsatisfied. The shield's energy was too weak, too fleeting, too ephemeral to interest it. The creature's tendril drifted higher, sweeping toward the primary hull, exploring. The hull flexed microscopically, metal resonating under gravitational stress. The creature paused. Something on the ship was brighter than shielding, stronger than incidental emissions. Something tasted like a star. Its attention snapped toward Carol. Her heart itself was a cipher of power, even restrained. The creature pulsed. Data spoke quickly. "It has targeted a biological source." Worf moved instantly. "We must increase shielding around sickbay." Carol interrupted sharply. "No, if you shield me more, my energy spikes will reflect harder. It'll smell me stronger." Picard turned to her. "Then what do you advise?" She held his gaze. "Let it want me, but let the deflector dish speak louder." Data pivoted back to the console, understanding instantly. Bridge to engineering. Initiate controlled harmonic projection. Begin lure modulation at low frequency. Geordi's voice answered. "Modulation starting. 3% output." The deflector dish pulsed with invisible resonance, singing in cosmic tones only predators could hear. The creature froze in space, tendrils curling inward, sensing something more flavorful, more vast. Riker's breath left him in a slow exhale. "It's listening," Carol nodded. "Increase slowly. Don't shock it." Geordi's voice returned, raising to 6%, 9, 12. The creature shuddered. Its form tightened into a vortex, spinning like a black hurricane made of lightless hunger. Space bent violently around it. The ship rattled again as gravitons twisted and recoiled. Worf braced. "It is preparing to feed," Carol answered. "Good." Data monitored the curve. Increased to 16%. Geordi complied. 16% and stable. Carol exhaled and allowed her power to pulse faintly, just enough to link with the dish's modulation. The creature twitched. It sensed her signal. It felt the deflector's pulse amplifying her resonance into star-like language. Carol whispered, "Speak louder." Picard nodded. "Mr. LaForge, 20%. The deflector dish flared invisibly, the Enterprise's hull humming as a resonance expanded into space like the heartbeat of a newborn sun. The creature convulsed with sudden ecstasy. It whipped toward the ship, not in attack, but in pursuit of abundance. Data confirmed. It is ignoring other energy sources in the sector. The lure has taken hold. Riker smirked grimly. "Congratulations, we are officially dinner." Carol smiled faintly. "No, we're the server. The meal comes later." The ship lurched as warp engines engaged, pulling the Enterprise away from the relay station and toward the white dwarf system. The creature followed, tethered to the lure like a shark scenting blood in the water. Picard spoke clearly through the tremor of the deck plates. "Maintain controlled emissions. Do not exceed 40% without direct order." Carol nodded. "At 40, we risk waking its mind." Riker frowned. "You said it wasn't intelligent," she clarified, eyes never leaving the screen. Hunger isn't intelligence, but it can become cunning if it connects eating with strategy. Worf growled. Then we give it no lessons. Minutes passed. The creature kept pace, reforming itself every few seconds, contorting, adapting to stay close to the signal. Particles bent around it. Space rippled in waves like water displaced by something vast beneath it. The white dwarf system loomed ahead, its dying light flickering like a candle trapped in wind. A dense gravity field swirled around it, pulling matter inward slowly but relentlessly. The dwarf rotated with silent fury, its magnetic field unstable and ready to tear apart anything too close. Carol watched it with grim familiarity. Perfect. Picard issued orders. Helm, prepare to enter orbit. Engineering, begin gravity well inversion. Tactical, ready subspace disruption charges. Medical, monitor Carol's vitals constantly. Crusher responded firmly. Already watching, Worf reported. Creature is accelerating. It will reach us in 90 seconds. Riker braced. And then what? Carol answered. Then we let a dying star eat it alive. The bridge held its breath. The countdown began. Picard stood strong, voice calm amid encroaching cosmic terror. On my mark, engage containment sequence. The creature closed in. The Enterprise skimmed the white dwarf's gravity. The trap was seconds from springing. Gravity is silent until it wants something. The white dwarf's pull stretched across space like an invisible tide. The Enterprise skimmed along its edge, engines roaring beneath the deck as they pushed against a force meant to collapse stars, not carry ships. The hull creaked as though enduring pressure from the weight of dying light itself. Warning lights flickered amber across the bridge. The star on the view screen pulsed feebly, unstable and exhausted, its magnetic lines coiling into chaotic spirals. The creature arrived in a blink. One moment it was a distant ripple. The next it merged from subspace inches away from the Enterprise's shields, tendrils unfurling like a mass of liquid shadow, gliding toward the deflector signal. Data spoke sharply. Target is within gravitational capture zone. 38 seconds until magnetic inversion schedule. Picard stood firm. Hold it steady. Do not react prematurely. Worf gripped the tactical console. Shields at 70% capacity. They are holding, but the entity is pressing. The creature pressed against the shields not as an attack, but as an instinctual embrace. It tasted the pulsing frequency that Carol channeled through the deflector, absorbing it through invisible sensory hunger. The energy did not feed it fully, not yet, but the lure was irresistible. Riker muttered, "It's waiting for its food to ripen." Carol stood at the upper ramp, watching the thing that had hunted her across realities. She whispered, more to herself than the crew, "No, it's savoring." She stared at its movement, at the way it stretched and recoiled, tasting and thinking without thought. Crusher, monitoring Carol's vitals, quietly noted that her pulse and energy output were rising. Carol's voice was low. "It's reading me, deciding if I'm enough." Picard's gaze shifted to her. "Then make it believe you are, but not too much." Carol inhaled slowly. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her glow deepened, not bright and wild, but focused, compressed, a star inside a cage of bone. The deflector pulse responded, amplifying her signature into a stellar frequency. The creature shuddered and whipped closer, reacting with ravenous tremors. Data announced, "It is fully anchored to the lure, subspace presence collapsing. It can no longer escape by phase shifting." Worf's eyes narrowed. "Then it is trapped," Carol whispered. Not yet. It still thinks it can feed. The gravitational turbulence intensified. The ship shook, violently, the hull groaning under strain. The white dwarf's light flickered brighter, as if alerted to new prey in its grasp. Alarms triggered across engineering. Geordi's voice crackled over comms. "We're at 94% gravitational tension on the hull. If we get any closer, we lose structural integrity." Picard raised his voice. "Helm, holding pattern. Maintain orbit edge." The creature spread itself wider, becoming a dark canopy draped over the bow of the Enterprise. Tendrils scraped against the shields, drawing sparks of energy out of them like static stolen through friction. The deflector pulse rhythm quickened as Carol increased intensity by another fractional increment. Crusher warned. "Her cellular output is rising too fast. She's burning through reserves." Carol shook slightly, the energy inside her pushing outward with urgency. She held it down, her breathing paced deliberately. She controlled the flame, not letting it escape its small, bright prison beneath her skin. Riker glanced toward the captain. "If we wait too long, it will learn instead of starve." Picard weighed every second like a blade. Data. Now. Data's fingers struck commands with impossible speed. Magnetic inversion beginning. Gravity well synchronization in progress. Adjusting field polarity. In engineering, conduits glowed dangerously as the star's magnetic field was rerouted. The Enterprise itself became part of the trap, a regulating boundary guiding gravity like reins on a wild beast. The white dwarf responded, its surface twisting as if agitated, flaring brighter. The creature twitched. It sensed the shift, but did not flee. Its hunger overwhelmed its awareness. Worf bared his teeth. "It is distracted," Carol murmured. "No, it's addicted." The magnetic inversion peaked. Data called out. "Containment window opening. 3 seconds." Riker braced. "Bring it to the feast." Carol stepped forward, drew a deep breath, and ignited. It was not a blast. It was a pulse, a single, stunning flare of focus, her entire being compressing power into a star's heartbeat. The deflector dish erupted in resonance, amplifying the pulse into a massive photonic wave. The creature convulsed in ecstasy and surged forward, diving toward its brightest source, directly into the gravity well. Data shouted, "Containment! Now!" The white dwarf flared and collapsed inward fractionally, its magnetic field slamming shut around the dark entity, like jaws closing on prey. Space warped dramatically. The bridge lights dimmed and returned. The creature thrashed wildly, stretched thin, pulled into the star's dying heart. Its tendrils spasmed and recoiled, scraping desperately against invisible walls. Growls without sound echoed across subspace. It tried to phase, failed. It tried to expand, failed. It tried to consume gravity itself, failed. Carol grimaced, hand gripping the rail as her power was sucked through the deflector like a tether being forcibly cut. She whispered through clenched teeth, "It's starving." The star's gravitational field compressed further. The creature's form warped into streaks of shadow, dragged toward a singular point. It shrank, thin, thinner, a smear of hunger suffocating into stillness. Data announced, subspace distortion decreasing. Entity is entering hibernation. Worf's voice rumbled triumph. It is finished. But Carol knew better. She breathed hard, sweat beading at her brow, glow fading into a dim ember. Not finished, contained. Picard's eyes met hers. "You said we must get it right the first time. Are we secure?" Carol steadied her breathing, watching the star slowly collapse around the trapped creature. The beast was no longer active, but its hunger lingered in the air like a scent. Carol's spine tingled with instinctive alertness. She turned to Picard. It'll sleep, but when the dwarf dies completely, it wakes again, and whatever wakes up will remember stars a little differently. Crusher stepped forward. Then we need to ensure the star remains stable. Carol shook her head. You can't. A white dwarf dies when it dies. All you can do is make sure it isn't fed. Picard nodded grimly. Then we build systems to monitor it, study it cautiously, and prevent future feeding. Carol looked at him, surprised by the answer. Not aggression, not dissection. Vigilance, restraint. She exhaled slowly. That's the right call. Picard clasped his hands behind him. Then let us see to the rescue of the relay station. And afterward, Ms. Danvers, you and I will discuss the future. She blinked. The future? He nodded. Of you. Carol stared at him, uncertain how to answer. She had fought monsters, survived wars, traveled galaxies, but she had never been asked what future she wanted. The ship accelerated away, leaving behind a dying star holding a sleeping predator. Carol's glow faded gently into quiet. The hunger was trapped. But for the first time, she wasn't. The Enterprise glided through calmer space now, the tension of the trap behind them. Yet the residue of crisis hung in the air like the echo of a storm. Crew members spoke in low tones. Engineering teams replaced scorched conduits. Even the hum of the warp core sounded a little strained, as if the ship itself needed to catch its breath. Carol Danvers walked through the corridors with a quietness that did not match the energy she normally emitted. Her glow was faint, barely visible beneath her skin, and her gait carried an unusual hesitancy. She had fought, focused, held herself back, and now the restraint lingered like a weight. Dr. Crusher guided her through medbay doors, tricorder already open. We need to confirm your cellular stability. Carol sat, stretching out her arm reluctantly as Crusher began scanning. The doctor's brow furrowed. Your cells are fluctuating. They're recalibrating after the energy output, but not evenly. Think of yourself as a reactor that's been throttled too fast. Carol sighed. So let them rebalance. Crusher shook her head. They won't without guidance. Your physiology isn't static. You adapt constantly, which means if the balance tips in the wrong direction, you could destabilize. Carol frowned. Meaning, what? I erupt or burn out? Crusher spoke carefully. Meaning you could either overload uncontrollably or lose your abilities completely. Both are possible outcomes. Carol studied her glowing hand, closing it into a loose fist. The universe always wants payment. Crusher softened her tone. It's not a threat. It's a health warning. Carol exhaled. I've had worse. I survived a Kree superweapon malfunction. I think I can handle a recalibrating biology. But her voice lacked its usual confidence. Crusher didn't miss it. You're frightened. Carol blinked, surprised. Am not. Crusher smiled knowingly. You're not afraid of losing your powers. You're afraid of losing control. Carol didn't answer. She didn't need to. Crusher closed the tricorder. I'm prescribing regular checks, guided modulation therapy, and no combat level exertion without clearance. Carol snorted lightly. You're grounding me? Crusher crossed her arms. You could blow up or fade away. Yes, I'm grounding you. Carol raised an eyebrow. That sounds like I'm 12. Crusher smiled. If you behave like you're 12, I'll treat you like it. Carol reacted with a reluctant smirk. Fine. Then the doctor's expression softened again. Carol, you don't need to prove anything here. You're safe." Carol blinked again. Safe. A strange word, one she rarely associated with anywhere she stayed. It lingered in her mind as she left sickbay. She didn't know how to feel about it. She stepped into a lift. Deck 10. The doors opened into 10 forward, the ship's lounge. The soft, dim lighting and wide windows offered calm views of the stars. Conversations were gentle, restful, and behind the bar, Guinan stood, polishing a glass with the same serene aura she always seemed to carry. Carol approached hesitantly. "You're the one who watches things, right? Reads things? Notices what others don't?" Guinan raised an eyebrow. "Depends who's asking," Carol smirked. "Someone who doesn't know how to sit still unless there's an enemy in front of her." Guinan nodded slowly. "Then yes, I'm the one you want to talk to." Carol sat, not sure what I want to say. Guinan leaned closer. "Then let's start there." Carol stared out at the stars. "I don't get the Federation. You see threats and don't crush them. You wait, you analyze, you let things be complicated." Guinan chuckled warmly. "And that bothers you?" Carol shrugged. "In my universe, hesitation costs lives." Guinan nodded. "And in this universe, reckless action costs more." Carol turned to her. "So, who's right?" Guinan's eyes softened. "Neither, which is why it's hard." Carol let the silence stretch. "I've been the weapon before. A lot of places wanted to use me. A lot of people feared me. And I never cared what they thought. I just did what needed doing." Guinan tilted her head. "And now?" Carol frowned. "Now I'm not sure what needs doing." Guinan placed the polished glass down gently. "Maybe that's good. Maybe for once, someone else can decide the fate of a galaxy. You don't always have to be the one who saves it by yourself." Carol swallowed hard, voice almost a whisper. "That's the only thing I'm good at." Guinan shook her head. "No, that's just the only thing you've been asked to do." Carol stared at her. The idea seemed foreign, almost dangerous. Across the room, Worf entered, posture stiff and precise. His gaze found Carol immediately. He approached and stood beside her with the solemnity of a warrior addressing another warrior. "Captain Danvers, I am here to apologize." Carol blinked. "For what?" Worf straightened further. "I doubted your control, your intentions, your honor. I saw only a potential threat, not a comrade. That was dishonorable." Carol blinked again, then gave a slow nod. "You thought I could endanger your crew." "You weren't wrong," Worf replied firmly. "It is still dishonorable to judge strength before understanding it." Carol smirked faintly. "Then apology accepted. But if you think you're the only one who misjudged, you're wrong." Worf frowned with curiosity. "You doubted us," Carol shrugged. "I thought the Federation was naive. Turns out you're patient, strategic, and annoyingly correct most of the time." Worf considered that, then nodded. A fair exchange. Carol raised her glass of water and toasted him. To annoying correctness. Worf raised his tea. To formidable allies. They drank. Guinan smiled silently behind the bar. The ship hummed softly beneath their feet, no longer strained, but recovering. And Carol felt a strange new sensation settling into her bones. Not tension, not adrenaline. Something she had never expected to feel on any starship. Belonging. The Enterprise cruised at Warp 7 on course toward the damaged solar relay. The engines hummed with renewed purpose, not emergency strain, but diligence. Repair teams prepared for what awaited them, and sensor arrays were tuned for the unknown. Carol stood at a viewport in one of the observation corridors, watching the blue and gold blur of warp space stretch like ripples against the hull. Her reflection stared back at her, glow faint, barely visible, but alive. She was quiet, not out of fear, but out of unfamiliar contemplation. The door behind her hissed open. Data approached, hands comfortably clasped behind him. "Ms. Danvers, may I ask you a question?" Carol smirked slightly. "That's your version of hello, isn't it?" He tilted his head. "I can include a greeting if necessary." She waved a dismissive hand. "No, go on. Ask." Data stepped beside her, gazing out at warp space. "I have been studying entities driven by instinctual consumption. The creature's hunger is analogous to biological organisms that feed without awareness or moral reasoning. Yet your response to it was emotional, not strategic." "Why?" Carol leaned on the railing. "Because I know what hunger without control looks like. I've seen people, whole worlds, enslaved to appetites they never asked for. Power becomes their cage. I didn't want to treat that thing like a villain, just like a beast." Data blinked, processing. "You empathized with an entity that threatened entire star systems." Carol shrugged. "Empathy's not mercy, it's perspective." Data considered this. "In Starfleet training, we are encouraged to understand other forms of life. But empathy is not a necessity to carry out our responsibilities. It is optional. You speak as though it is essential." Carol smiled gently. "Where I come from, if you only fight the enemy you understand, you end up fighting everyone." Data paused thoughtfully. "That sounds paradoxical, and yet statistically wise." They stood in silence for a moment, stars continuing to blur past them. Finally, Carol asked quietly, "You ever want to feel something? Not just analyze it?" Data looked at her, golden eyes neutral, yet curious. "Yes, I am aware of what I lack, and I know that understanding is not the same as experiencing." Carol nodded. "And you want that?" "Yes," Data replied simply. She looked at him with unexpected seriousness. "Then don't let anyone treat what you are like a limitation. Curiosity is more human than emotion." Data's head tilted again, analyzing her statement. "That is reassuring. Thank you," Carol smiled. "You're welcome." The comm system chimed overhead. "Picard to Commander Data and Ms. Danvers. Report to the bridge." They exchanged a brief glance and began walking. On the bridge, the atmosphere shifted from casual routine to tactical alertness. Spatial charts glowed on the main display. The relay station appeared as a cluster of platforms orbiting a dim, unstable star. Massive structural breaches marred the installation. Scorch marks and twisted metal stretched across its hull, as though something had scraped the surface with unimaginable force. Riker frowned. "That doesn't look like damage from a collision. Something carved into it." Worf's voice rumbled darkly. "A weapon, or claws." Carol's eyes narrowed. The entity wasn't just feeding on stars, it was feeding through infrastructure. Picard nodded gravely. It drained the station first, then the star. Systems with abundant energy would be natural stepping stones. Data tapped the console. Confirmed. Residual photonic abnormalities on the station matched the entity's subspace signature. It did not simply consume the star's energy. It harvested intermediary sources to catalyze its feeding. Carol crossed her arms. It was getting stronger before the star, so it wouldn't waste energy moving between targets. Efficient. Geordi's voice came through the comm. "Captain, I'm getting abnormal readings from the relay's core. There's partial power, but it's unstable, like a half-charged bomb." Picard nodded. Prepare a boarding team. Beverly, Worf, Data. You'll assess potential survivors and secure the station's core. Ms. Danvers, Carol interrupted, anticipating. I'm staying behind, doctor's orders and all that. Picard raised an eyebrow. Do you intend to ignore them? Carol hesitated. No, I'll follow protocol. Worf looked at her, surprised. You are choosing restraint, Carol smirked faintly. Better get used to it. I'm evolving. Picard nodded with approval. Then remain on standby. If the station's instability escalates, we may require you. But for now, caution is wisdom. The away team transported onto the relay. The interior was dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights that cast long shadows across metal corridors, warped by unseen force. The aroma of burnt plasma lingered like a ghost. Crusher's tricorder beeped rapidly. I have faint life signs. Multiple, not stable. They moved deeper. Panels were scorched with streaks of photonic residue. Data scanned them closely. The entity passed through here, but not physically. It fed through energy conduits, absorbing power from within. Worf surveyed the gouges along the wall. Something tore into the structure as it fed. Crusher's voice tightened. If there are survivors, they may suffer radiation injuries or neurological shock. Data located a sealed hatch. Behind it, faint biometrics. He pried it open with a grace bordering on effortless strength. Inside, 3 Starfleet engineers lay unconscious, covered in burns and frost from emergency cryostasis protocols. Crusher knelt immediately. They're alive, barely. They stabilized themselves before the power surge killed them. Worf secured the area, while Data monitored fluctuating energy levels. Captain, Data reported. The station's core is destabilizing. Remaining power is being siphoned into a feedback loop. The entity left behind an energy imprint. If not dispersed, it could trigger a local detonation. Picard's voice responded through comm. Can it be disengaged safely? Negative, Data replied. The feedback must be diffused, not stopped. Carol listened from the bridge, sensing the trap's implication. If they cut the power, the station might explode. If they let it run, it might summon the creature back. Picard spoke sharply. Miss Danvers, to the transporter room. Carol moved instantly. Minutes later, she stood at the platform as Crusher's emergency transport beamed the injured crew aboard. Crusher rushed them out. Picard turned to Carol. The away team requires a controlled photonic anchor. Can you drain the feedback without overloading? Carol studied her glowing palm for a long moment. I don't know, but I can try. This time, there was no fire in her tone. No bravado, just confidence tempered by caution. Picard nodded. Then do it, but follow Data's parameters precisely. If your energy output deviates, even by a fraction, Carol finished the warning. I could blow the station, destabilize the star, and lure the entity back. Picard met her eyes. No heroics, no improvisation. Control, Ms. Danvers. Carol exhaled. Control. On the view screen, the relay's core flickered dangerously. Carol focused her breath. Her glow sharpened, but did not flare. Controlled light. She was ready. The transporter beam shimmered onto the failing relay. Carol emerged into thick, metallic haze, an oppressive heat radiating from half-melted conduits. Alarms howled in staggered pulses, then cut out abruptly as power sputtered. The world around her crackled with unstable electricity and photonic residue, and the entire installation seemed to vibrate like a machine ready to rupture. Data met her immediately, tricorder already open, voice precise. You must extract the excess photonic charge without exceeding a containment threshold of 240,000 joules per second. Deviate above that, and the core will rupture. Drop below, and the feedback will collapse the stabilizers and implode. Carol gave a dry whisper. So no pressure. Crusher, crouched beside an unconscious engineer they hadn't transported yet, looked up sharply. Carol, you push too much and we all die. You push too little and you drain yourself into a coma. Keep a steady rate. Worf positioned himself between them and the entrance corridor, phaser lowered but ready. If the station's internal fields collapse, debris may breach. He said it like a promise he intended to stand against. Carol nodded once, locking her breathing into a steady rhythm. The relay's core was not a towering reactor, but a dense cylinder embedded into the wall, glowing erratically like an angry heart. Plasma arcs snapped unpredictably from the surface, cutting scorch trails through bulkheads. A storm trapped in steel. Data motioned her forward. Maintain precise emission synchronization with the core's secondary pulse generator. Match frequency. Do not exceed it. Let the feedback anchor to you without feeding on you. Carol extended her hand. The glow that formed along her fingers was tight and sharp, like a blade rather than a flare. She edged closer. The core reacted immediately. It detected her energy signature like a starving creature sensing food. The hum sharpened into a shriek. The feedback loop began to spike. Carol winced. Data's voice cut like a metronome. Do not withdraw. Increase by 1.7%. Match the surge. Do it now. Carol's glow brightened a fraction, steady but strained. The spike leveled. The shriek reduced to a vibrational hiss. She gritted her teeth. It wants more than I can give. Data adjusted readings. It is mistaking you for the previous entity's connection. You must convince it you are not a gateway. Carol focused harder, compressing the energy in her palm. Instead of offering raw power, she inverted her output, forcing her energy to mimic a stabilizing frequency rather than a flaring one. The core responded by quieting, not satisfied, but redirected. Worf growled admiringly. She is taming it, Crusher corrected without looking up. She's negotiating with it, Carol whispered, breathlessly. Same thing. Her glow grew controlled, rhythmic. The light formed in structured pulses, matching the machine's unstable heartbeat. The feedback loop latched onto her wavelength, not to feed, but to transfer. Excess photonic charge drained slowly, painfully, like pulling venom through a wound. Data studied the readings. The discharge is stabilizing. Continue. Minutes crawled. Sweat rolled down Carol's forehead, evaporating into faint steam. Her knees trembled. Her breathing became shallow. Her glow flickered, dimmed, reignited, dimmed again. Crusher glanced up, alarmed. She's losing too much energy. Her cells can't replenish at this rate. Carol forced her voice through clenched teeth. Don't stop. If I stop, it blows. But her pulse began to spike. Her fingers twitched involuntarily. Her glow wavered wildly. Data adjusted calculations with lightning precision. Increase internal resistance by 4%. Do not amplify. Contain. Carol tried. Her hand shook violently. Light sputtered, sagged. Crusher called out, almost shouting. Carol, breathe slower. Your body is panicking. You're not burning out. You're adapting. Let the change happen. Carol gasped. Adapt? How? Crusher's voice softened into command. Don't fight. Let your cells choose the level. Follow their lead, not your instincts. Carol closed her eyes. Her glow shifted. Not brighter, not dimmer, different. It became cooler, less solar, more something else. Controlled photonic charge, shaped like water instead of fire. The energy flowed through her, not from her, like she had turned her own star into a river. The core responded. It calmed, its surface no longer spiking, but pulsing in sync, like two hearts sharing rhythm. Data's eyes widened, fascinated. She has altered her energy form. She is no longer emitting stellar radiation. She is channeling through a photonic conversion state. Crusher stared. She changed the way her power works, in real time. Worf stood silent, respect deepening into something bordering awe. Carol slowly exhaled as the core dimmed. Not dead, not empty, balanced, data scanned, feedback loop dissolved, photonic residue expended. The station is stable. Carol lowered her hand, staggering backward as her knees buckled. Data caught her arm with careful strength. Easy. You are clinically exhausted, but cellular integrity is stable. Carol laughed weakly. So I didn't explode or black out. That's progress. Crusher checked her vitals. You adapted instead of forcing control. That's what saved you. Carol nodded, breath shaking. I just listened. The last unconscious engineer was beamed out. The away team prepared for extraction. Worf looked around the damaged corridors. Many would have died here if not for your restraint. Carol gave him a tired smirk. Careful, Lieutenant. You keep complimenting me. I might start thinking you like me. Worf snorted. Let us not go that far. They transported back to the Enterprise. As the shimmering lights solidified into the transporter room, Carol felt the ship beneath her feet like a steady foundation, unlike the collapsing star, unlike the dying station. Stable. She stepped off the pad, eyes heavy, head swimming from fatigue. Picard stood waiting, not smiling, not stern, simply present. Ms. Danvers, you saved that station not by force, but by control. You chose patience. Carol leaned against the railing slightly. Believe me, it wasn't my first choice. Picard nodded with quiet approval. Then perhaps that is growth. She chuckled, exhausted. You sound like my old commanding officer, Picard replied mildly. Then they must have been a wise individual. She shook her head with a fond scoff. He was infuriating. Picard smiled politely. Then I shall endeavor to continue the tradition. As the crew dispersed, Carol remained, feeling the gravity of stillness settle around her. She had fought. She had adapted. She had chosen restraint. And the Enterprise had chosen her back. She whispered softly, almost to herself, maybe I can learn to belong here. If space had a scent, it would be the quiet hum that clung to the Enterprise after a disaster averted, tense but proud, spent but hopeful. Engineering teams replaced transit conduits. Medical teams stabilized survivors. Tactical reviewed protocols, not for mistakes, but to refine successes. The ship did not celebrate survival. It prepared for the future. Carol Danvers sat alone in the gym, her breathing steady, her posture rigid. She stared at a holographic combat dummy that glowed faintly in front of her. Not a threat, not a challenge, just a shape waiting for direction. The program awaited her input, but she had yet to engage. She flexed her hand and let a small flicker of energy dart across her knuckles. A week ago, she might have fired a blast point blank to test her output. Now she studied the flare the way someone studies their heartbeat. The light pulsed steady, controlled, quiet. She launched forward suddenly, not with power, but with technique. Her punch landed without a photon flare, only muscle. The dummy recoiled, but did not dissolve. She pivoted, kicking with precision instead of force. Strike, withdraw, breathe, strike, withdraw, breathe. A figure stepped through the open doorway. Worf watched silently, arms behind his back. Carol continued without acknowledgement, finishing a set of strikes before stepping back. She wiped sweat from her brow. "Let me guess. You're here to critique my form?" Worf approached. "No, I am here to spar." Carol blinked. "Spar? With me?" Worf nodded once. "You are powerful even without your abilities. I wish to understand your technique. Pure technique, no weapons, no energy." Carol raised a playful brow. "Worried I'll blast you?" Worf responded gravely. "If you do, I will survive. If you do not control your power, you may not." She paused. His logic held a kind of honor she respected. She nodded. "Fine. Hand to hand." The two squared off. Worf adjusted his stance. Carol mirrored with a fighter pilot's readiness. Balance low, arms relaxed. He lunged first, powerful, direct. Carol deflected his strike with her forearm, redirecting momentum instead of resisting. He swung low. She leaped over the sweep. No glow, no blast, no advantage beyond human technique honed by years of combat. Worf pressed, each motion heavier and faster. Carol countered with speed and instinct until she misjudged a strike and was forced to twist aside, barely avoiding a hit that would have broken her rib. Worf froze the moment she stumbled. "Enough." Carol frowned. "Why stop?" "You lost focus," he said simply. She wiped sweat again, irritation flaring. "I didn't lose focus. I adapted." Worf shook his head. "You hesitated. Your instinct looked for power you chose not to use. You were caught between two selves." Carol opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She looked down at her fists. "Caught between two selves." Worf continued. "You are learning control, but you have not yet accepted limitation." Carol's shoulders lowered. She breathed out slowly. "Limitation feels like weakness," Worf corrected firmly. "It is not weakness to choose how you fight. It is wisdom to know how you must fight." Carol nodded once, quietly. "Then let's start again." Worf stepped back into stance. She mirrored him. They sparred again. This time Carol no longer fought like someone suppressing power, but like someone who intended never to use it. Her motions became cleaner, clearer, not frantic, intentional. Worf increased force. She responded with technique instead of instinct. When he finally landed a hit, a deep, heavy strike to her shoulder, she did not react with frustration. She adjusted her guard. Worf stepped back, offering a warrior's nod. "Better," Carol smirked. "You hit hard." Worf's reply was simple. "You moved honestly." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a Klingon compliment. If you must name it, yes." Carol laughed softly, rubbing her sore shoulder. But there was pride there. Not the pride of power, but of progress. Over the next 2 days, the Enterprise finished repairs on the relay station. Starfleet vessels arrived to assume monitoring of the dormant stellar trap. Engineers from the station visited the Enterprise to offer thanks. Carol met them, but did not bask in their praise. She shook hands, offered advice, accepted their gratitude with modesty she hadn't known she possessed. On the bridge, Picard oversaw the final handoff. The vessel USS Magellan took position, prepared to study the white dwarf and its imprisoned predator. Data transmitted containment readings. Crusher offered medical reports. Riker instructed operational handoff procedures. Worf shared tactical warnings. Together, the crew ensured the trap would hold, not as a prison, but as a safeguard. Carol stood near the back of the bridge, arms folded, neither needed nor dismissed. Watched how an entire crew transitioned from crisis to continuation. She saw discipline work without ego. She saw leadership without showmanship. No one sought glory. They only sought completion. Picard approached her. "You've grown quieter," Carol chuckled. "Don't tell Worf, he'll think he won." Picard raised an eyebrow. "And would that bother you?" She shook her head. "A month ago? Yes. Now? No. Maybe it's good someone else has the last word sometimes." Picard studied her. "Have you considered what comes next for you?" She exhaled. "I don't know. That creature may wake someday, and there'll be other threats, but I don't always have to be the first to run toward them." Picard nodded. "You could remain here, as an advisor, a civilian specialist." Carol blinked. "You're offering me a place?" "No," Picard corrected gently. "I am offering you a choice." Carol swallowed. Choice. It was such a simple word, one she rarely experienced. Most of her life had been reaction and responsibility. Now the universe paused, leaving room for a question she had never asked. What do I want? Picard did not push for an answer. He only left her with the possibility. As the Enterprise turned away from the relay system on a new heading, Carol looked out at the stars. She was not a weapon waiting for the next battle. She was not prey running from the next threat. For the first time in a long time, she was someone deciding where she belonged, and she chose to stay, at least for now, not because she must, but because she wanted to. Weeks passed aboard the Enterprise, not of constant crisis, nor of victories loud enough to echo through the stars, but weeks of work, weeks of learning, weeks of everyday missions that were neither galaxy-saving nor history-making, yet mattered all the same. Carol Danvers found that unsettling at first. She was used to responding to emergencies like a reflex. She was used to the universe shouting in her direction, demanding something of her, needing something only she could give, threatening collapse if she hesitated. But here, the galaxy didn't call for her every morning. Some days her tasks were simple, assisting engineering with radiation shielding calibration, helping medical interpret energy-based injuries, acting as an advisor on first contact scenarios involving high-energy life forms. Not as a weapon, but as a consultant. She felt strangely human. In the ship's arboretum one afternoon, she sat beneath a synthetic maple tree. Its leaves rustled in simulated wind the way earth trees might on a quiet Sunday morning. She examined a data tablet filled with stellar energy models Data had prepared for her study. She understood them instinctively, not as theory, but like a second language. It amused her to struggle with the equations while knowing she could feel them in her bones. A shadow fell over her. Data stood nearby, holding a watering device for the plants. "Ms. Danvers, I have observed that you appear relaxed." Carol smirked. "You make it sound like a malfunction." Data blinked. "Possibly. I am still evaluating." She patted the grass beside her. "Sit. Relaxing won't break you." He followed the instruction literally and sat cross-legged, posture stiff but earnest. The watering device hummed softly as he tended to flowers growing near the trunk. After a moment, Carol asked, "Data, do you ever feel like you should be doing more? Like the galaxy expects something big from you, and you're wasting time if you're just..." "Here," Data pondered. "I do not perceive expectation the way you do. I know what I am capable of. If I am not required to act immediately, it does not diminish my value." Carol exhaled slowly. That's a healthy way to look at it. Data's gaze tilted. And you? She looked at her glowing fingertips, faint and controlled. I've always been expected to be the person who fixes disasters. I don't hate that, but I'm learning there's more than rushing from catastrophe to catastrophe. I'd like to choose when to help, not just react. Data nodded. Choice is a form of autonomy. You did not always have it? Carol stared at the artificial sky above. No, and I didn't notice because the adrenaline felt like purpose. Data set down the watering tool. Then perhaps your true purpose is not reaction. Perhaps it is direction. Carol looked at him, surprised by the insight. You may be right. He blinked. I often am. She laughed. Confident today, aren't you? He tilted his head. I am experimenting. She shook her head, smiling. Never change. The ship suddenly slowed beneath them, the warp field dissipating. The overhead lights flickered not alarmingly, but signifying transition. A voice sounded through the comm. Attention all personnel. We are approaching the Regulus mining belt for scheduled environmental inspection and treaty review. Carol raised an eyebrow. We're doing environmental work now? Data stood. The mining belt is a resource conflict zone shared by several civilizations. Starfleet mediates to prevent ecological destruction. This mission is diplomatic, scientific, and potentially volatile. Carol stretched her arms, intrigued. Potentially volatile. Now you're speaking my language. On the bridge, Picard briefed the team. A holographic display showed a cluster of asteroid-like resource stations and cargo routes, guarded by mining drones and commercial patrol ships. The Regulan Belt is jointly operated by the Federation, the Tellarites, and the independent Rygax Consortium. Recently, there have been disputes regarding ore extraction quotas and radiation waste disposal. Our role is to investigate contamination claims and ensure treaty compliance. Riker added, some factions want to increase extraction. Others demand stoppage until cleanup happens. Every group thinks they're the reasonable one. Worf scowled. That means no one is reasonable. Picard nodded. Precisely why? We're here. Carol entered the bridge mid-brief. Environmental disputes? Didn't expect that to be Starfleet business. Riker grinned. A galaxy at peace still needs babysitters, Picard corrected gently. Guardians, not babysitters. Peace requires maintenance. Carol folded her arms. So this isn't a battle. It's a negotiation. Picard smiled faintly. Ms. Danvers, I assure you, negotiations can be far more dangerous than battles. The Enterprise initiated contact with Regulus Station Sigma, the largest mining hub in the belt. A Tellarite administrator appeared on screen, tusks prominent, expression agitated. Captain Picard, you're late. The Rygax Consortium has increased extraction again, and their waste is contaminating our corridors. Witness reports show elevated gamma surge levels. You must shut them down immediately. Before Picard could reply, another face erupted onto a second feed. A Rygax trader, scales shimmering across their reptilian skin. That is a lie. The waste leakage comes from Tellarite neglect. We demand the right to expand operations to offset economic loss. Our workers are suffering shortages. Then a third transmission joined. A Federation representative already stationed there, looking exhausted. Captain, I've been trying to mediate for days. No one trusts anyone. They refuse data sharing and sabotage each other's monitors. If you don't impose joint analysis, this situation could collapse into a diplomatic crisis, Carol whispered beneath her breath. Yeah, this'll blow up. Picard straightened. Then let us begin with cooperative science. We will deploy a Starfleet environmental survey team to evaluate ore processing methods, waste output, and reactor signatures. Participating factions must provide access to their facilities. The Tellarite huffed. Fine, the Rigax trader hissed. Only if they carry no weapons. Worf bared his teeth slightly. We do not require weapons to expose the truth. Carol elbowed him slightly. Careful, you're beginning to sound like a diplomat. Worf frowned deeply. Do not insult me. Riker hid a laugh. Picard orchestrated the plan with practiced elegance. Data, Crusher, and Geordi would lead the inspection. Carol was assigned as Energy Anomaly Advisor, a fancy way of saying someone who can detect foul play. Before disembarking, Crusher paused Carol in the corridor. Remember, this mission is diplomacy. Avoid using your powers unless absolutely necessary. Carol nodded. Got it. Control, not force. Crusher softened. Don't just control energy. Control your presence. You don't need to intimidate to be effective. Carol absorbed this slowly. She'd never been taught to be small on purpose. As the away team transported onto Sigma Station, a harsh sight awaited them. Damaged ore processors leaking faint radiation, malfunctioning drones scraping debris across metal floors, and the scent of overheated plasma like burnt ozone. Technicians argued loudly in every corridor. Someone threw a tool. Security intervened. No gunfire, no physical combat. Yet tension hung like compressed pressure, waiting for the wrong spark. Carol whispered to Data. This place is ready to explode, Data replied calmly. Then we must defuse it. Carol expected action. She found analysis. She expected danger. She found fragility. She expected to break something. She was here to fix something. Not a star, not a monster, just people. People were harder. The deeper they moved into Regulus Station Sigma, the more the air itself seemed to vibrate with hostility. Not violent hostility, the brittle, exhausted kind that comes from overworked people who believe they are being ignored. Miners with soot-stained faces muttered in hallways. Traders argued with administrators. Engineers slammed their tools louder than necessary, creating accidental percussion to their frustration. Carol noticed immediately. This wasn't a war zone. It was a pressure cooker. Geordi led the team toward the main reactor chamber, navigating through narrow metallic corridors. The structure felt tight, as though the walls themselves were straining. Carol took in every flickering light and every spark off exposed conduits, her instincts prickling. Radiation levels were higher than they should have been. Not deadly, but neglected. Crusher checked her tricorder readings. I'm seeing chronic exposure levels above safety tolerance for workers. Not high enough to cause crisis, but high enough to cause long-term illness. Geordi frowned. These reactors are patched together with aftermarket parts. Somebody cut costs. Data stepped forward to the nearest terminal, examining fluctuating plasma graphs. Verification complete. Reactor efficiency has been reduced by 34% compared to regulation standards. Someone bypassed official maintenance logs. Carol raised an eyebrow. Someone's hiding something. That explains the secrecy, the sabotage accusations. Crusher nodded grimly. Each faction thinks the other is poisoning the station. Meanwhile, everyone is being poisoned by negligence. They continued through the industrial maze of the facility. At the core monitoring station, Carol felt the energy before the readout confirmed it. A tight, vibrating pressure in her chest, like static building on a storm cloud. She whispered, "Stop." The team froze. Data scanned again. You detected something? Carol narrowed her eyes. Not something alive, something wrong. Geordi approached the central reactor casing, his eyes focusing through his visor. Damn, somebody installed an unapproved stabilizer coil. Crusher frowned. That's good, right? Geordi shook his head. Not if it's the cheap kind. These knockoff coils overcompensate, leaking ionized exhaust. That's what's causing the excess radiation. Whoever installed this either had no idea what they were doing, or they did it on purpose. Data concluded this modification was made by one individual, a single worker or engineer, a non-random act. Carol tapped a railing. So someone sabotaged the reactor to create a crisis and blame the other side. Crusher exhaled. And now 3 factions are accusing each other without knowing they're victims of the same crime. Worf's voice came through the comm from the Enterprise. Do you require security support? Carol answered before anyone else could. Not yet. The last thing this place needs is phaser rifles walking through a minefield of paranoia. Picard's voice followed. Agreed. A heavy-handed approach will escalate tensions. Continue your investigation. Locate the installer. Carol looked back at the reactor casing. Whoever installed this tried to cause a diplomatic meltdown, not a physical one. They wanted outrage, not explosions. Geordi stared at her. You're saying we're dealing with sabotage meant to spark political war? Carol nodded. A civil worker with an agenda, or someone being paid to destabilize regional cooperation. Crusher clicked her tricorder shut. Someone wanted to weaponize anger. That sentence lingered. Weaponize anger. Carol knew that tactic too well. She had seen empires use it. She had seen governments collapse under it. She herself had once nearly become a tool for it. She whispered, "Not this time." They proceeded to maintenance logs, reviewing access patterns. One worker ID repeated across system overrides. A technician, Jorek Brex, Rygax-born. No disciplinary record, no complaints, no reputation for trouble. Data commented. His profile contains no indicators of extremist sentiment, yet he has performed unauthorized modifications. Carol stared at Brex's image on the screen. Young, exhausted eyes, dark circles, expression dulled by work and survival. She frowned. This isn't sabotage for politics. Look at his face. That's a guy trying to fix something without resources. Geordi zoomed into energy usage logs. He installed the coil after the primary stabilizer failed. He didn't sabotage. He improvised because he wasn't given proper parts. Crusher whispered. They forced him to work with defective materials. He thought he was saving the station. Carol clenched her jaw. And the result is slow contamination. Everyone's blaming everyone because someone high up cut corners. Data confirmed this conclusion as more access records aligned. The Rygax Consortium authorized reduced maintenance budgets. They funneled funds elsewhere. Greed, not warmongering, was the cause. Carol leaned against a wall. People are choking on radiation just so someone can pocket profits. Crusher's voice shook with quiet anger. And the workers are fighting each other instead of seeing the truth. Carol nodded. If we expose this the wrong way, they'll riot. They won't unite. They'll explode. Geordi wiped sweat from his brow. So, how do we expose it the right way? Carol answered slowly. You don't call them out. You show them how you fix it, together. You make cooperation part of the solution. If each faction contributes to fixing the reactor, they'll own the solution and see who didn't help, Data added. They will naturally recognize the source of the problem when other parties willingly assist. Crusher smiled, faintly. Self-revelation, not accusation. Carol smirked. Make them heroes together, and the guilty party becomes obvious by exclusion. Back on the Enterprise, Picard heard the plan and nodded approvingly. A solution that repairs both machinery and trust. Elegant, Worf grunted, and not Klingon. Riker crossed his arms. Let's hope it's Tellarite and Rygax enough. Within hours, a joint repair crew, guided by Starfleet, fueled by curiosity rather than blame, assembled around the reactor. Carol watched them work side by side, grumbling but cooperating. Tellarites cursed at Rygax welders. Rygax engineers rolled their eyes at Federation safety protocols. Federation workers complained about both but kept everything stable. The repairs were finished without fists, without explosions, without war. And when news spread that consortium leadership had withheld proper resources, no riot erupted. Just outrage. Directed outrage. Outrage with purpose. Carol watched arguments in assembly halls begin not with species-driven insults, but demands for accountability. She whispered to herself, "This is how you stop a war before it starts." On the Enterprise, Picard met her in the observation lounge after the mission concluded. The stars turned slowly outside the window. "Ms. Danvers, today you resolved a crisis without force, by guiding others to see truth instead of delivering it." Carol shrugged. "I didn't fight. I just focused people in the right direction." Picard smiled. "That is what leadership is." She looked out at the stars, not as the battlefield she was always thrown into, but as a place she could choose her path. For the first time, she was starting to feel something dangerous. Hope. The Enterprise left the Regulus mining belt with no weapons fired, no speeches forced, and no triumphant music. The victory was quieter than the hum of the warp engine, a mess avoided, a future improved, not dramatic, not legendary, and yet the kind of change Carol had rarely seen survive in her own universe. Days passed in steady rhythm, the ship gliding through deep space on a routine science route. Carol used the time to continue something she had been avoiding for most of her adult life. Rest. She attended physical therapy sessions without complaint now. She exercised without trying to break speed barriers or overexert herself. She walked into engineering meetings without interrupting anyone. She learned how environmental systems compensated for life support variance. She learned why you don't reroute power through a plasma manifold just because it looks more efficient on paper. She even helped clean an atmospheric filter once, something she could have burned clean in a heartbeat. But she scrubbed instead. Slowly. Some crew members asked why she didn't use her abilities. She kept answering the same thing. Because I don't need to. That answer felt new every time she said it. But while the ship was calm, Carol herself wasn't entirely at peace. Her powers were quieter now, but still present, never fully silent. They pulsed like a heartbeat she couldn't quite forget, responding unexpectedly to thoughts or emotions. She still wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to energy listening to her instead of wrestling her. She'd wake up some mornings with her fingertips glowing faintly, not with exhaustion, but from dreams she couldn't remember. Control was no longer a fight. It was a relationship, one she was just beginning to understand. In the ship's small meditation chamber, a room meant mostly for crew stress management, Carol sat cross-legged in silence. She wasn't meditating, she was just sitting. The artificial waterfall whispered in the corner. Light panels mimicked dawn. She stared at her palm. The glow there pulsed softly, almost breathing. "You're not trying to burn everything down anymore," she murmured, "so I shouldn't treat you like you always will." She let her fingers close gently. The glow faded, not suppressed, simply settled. A voice spoke from the doorway. "You are speaking to it like a person." She turned. Data stood at the entrance, holding a small device that looked like a portable harmonic tuner. Carol chuckled. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I spent too long treating my power like a weapon. Maybe it needed permission to be something else." Data considered this. Permission implies choice. "Are you suggesting your energy has its own autonomy?" Carol shrugged. "Maybe not. But I think power behaves differently, depending on whether it's given purpose or forced to have one." Data nearly smiled, his version of delight. "That is philosophically intriguing." Carol grinned. "I'm full of surprises." He nodded. "Indeed. However, I did not come to discuss philosophy. I came because Captain Picard requests your presence in the observation lounge." Carol stood. "Am I in trouble?" Data blinked. "Unlikely. Captain Picard has a unique facial indicator for when someone is in trouble." His lips tightened by precisely 1 millimeter. Carol laughed. "And how tight are they right now?" Data answered. "Neutral. 0 millimeters." Carol exhaled with exaggerated relief. "Then I'm safe." When she entered the observation lounge, Picard, Crusher, Riker, and Worf sat at the table. A holographic projection of a star map shimmered above the center, highlighting a sector Carol didn't recognize. She took her seat. "So what disaster are we facing now?" Picard raised a brow. "Who said anything about disaster?" Carol gestured around. "You don't assemble these four unless something's exploding, mutating, or preparing to eat us." Riker snorted. "She's not wrong." Picard sighed softly. "Very well. A matter has arisen, but not the kind you're used to." Worf leaned forward. "We have received an encrypted subspace transmission. Content unknown. Origin uncertain. But the signal is encoded in a pattern, matching your energy signature." Carol stiffened. "Like the thing we trapped?" Worf shook his head. "Negative. It does not resemble the Predator's resonance. It resembles yours." Crusher slid a tablet toward Carol. The message contained erratic but deliberate pulses of light wave encoding, a language written in energy rather than letters. Some of the pattern resembled astronavigation sequences. Other parts resembled distress signaling. Carol stared at the pulsing lines, heart tightening. Someone, or something, was speaking like she did when she was binary. A voice without voice. Light calling through space. Picard spoke softly. "We thought you should see it first." Carol traced the encoded waveform. It didn't feel like power. It felt like asking, reaching, not aggressive, not predatory, lonely. She whispered, "Whoever sent this isn't hunting. They're lost." Riker frowned. "Lost how? In space?" Carol shook her head. "In themselves," Crusher asked gently. "Do you think it's a person?" Carol hesitated. A long moment passed. Then she nodded. "Yes, or something close enough." Worf leaned forward. "And if it is like you, could it also be dangerous?" Carol answered, with a voice full of knowing. "Everything powerful is dangerous if it's alone and scared." Picard locked eyes with her. "Then what do you propose we do?" Carol swallowed, realizing something profound. For the first time, she wasn't being asked to destroy a threat. She wasn't even being asked to save one. she was being asked what to do. She exhaled, then said something she never imagined she would suggest. We go to them, carefully, not ready to fight, just ready to listen. If they're like me, they need someone who understands what they are, before someone else decides what to fear. Picard nodded slowly, the weight of the choice recognized. Then we set a course, not as hunters, not as rescuers, as diplomats. Carol looked out the window as the stars shifted, their new destination already aligning. She hadn't realized how much she'd wanted this. Not a mission of force, but a mission of recognition. Someone out there was burning alone. It was time to help them find a different way to glow. The Enterprise adjusted its course, warp trails bending into a narrow and uncertain vector. The bridge lights dimmed to evening tone, but there was nothing restful about the atmosphere. The signal, Carol's signal, or something like it, echoed faintly through long-range sensors. Not strong enough to track directly, but constant enough to call. Carol stood beside Data at the science console, watching the strange light pattern repeating in intervals across subspace. The pulses were uneven, like a voice stuttering words through static. No identifiable language, no clear intent, but the rhythm was unmistakable. It was trying to be understood. Riker paced behind them. It's like someone knocking on a door, but forgetting how to knock. Carol nodded. They're struggling, fighting themselves maybe, or losing coherence. Data regarded her thoughtfully. You are interpreting this signal emotionally, Carol shrugged, instinctively. That's how powers like mine behave. When someone who emits energy is scared, they don't scream, they flare. Picard watched from the center of the bridge, arms behind his back. And if this signal is a flare, Carol answered softly, then someone's drowning, Worf growled low. A drowning creature can drag others down. Carol looked at him, not offended, but acknowledging. True, that's why you don't let it drown alone. Sensors chimed softly. Data pressed several keys. We are approaching the signal's origin point. The source lies near the edge of a stellar nursery. Dense gas clouds, high radiation, numerous protostars in formation, Carol whispered. A place full of raw energy. If something like me were unstable, it might go there unintentionally, instinctively. Riker frowned. A newborn star field isn't exactly hospitable. A slip of containment and boom. Worf said it more bluntly. An unstable being there could ignite an entire cluster. Carol stepped toward the view screen, where swirling cosmic roots of light and dust flickered in nebulous blues and violets. A nursery, a place where stars are made, a place where stars are still vulnerable. Crusher's voice came through comm from sickbay. Carol, be careful with how you interpret this. Emotional empathy is valuable, but don't assume this being wants help. Their distress could be defensive, not a plea. Carol answered quietly. I know, but someone out there is emitting energy the way I used to when I thought force was the only way to survive. Fear and power shouldn't have to be the same thing. The ship slowed to impulse speed. Clouds of ionized gas surrounded them like electric fog. The light waves pulsed faintly through the nebula, sporadic, flickering, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. The closer they came, the less stable the readings became. Data's voice sharpened. The signal is degrading, rapidly. Carol's pulse quickened. They're losing coherence. They're burning out. Picard turned from the screen. Suggestions? Carol swallowed. Let me signal back. Worf narrowed his eyes. You intend to reveal yourself. You could be targeted. Carol stepped to the center of the bridge. If they're like me, they'll sense me anyway. Better to show them something calm on purpose than let them feel me panicking. Crusher appeared on the view screen from sickbay. Carol, if your energy levels spike, your cells could destabilize. You're still adapting. If you overextend... Carol cut her off gently. I know the risks. I'll keep it controlled. Just a pulse, not power. Presence. Picard studied her. You are certain? Carol nodded. I'm not fighting. I'm answering. Picard raised his hand. Proceed. Carol stepped near the science console. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself the same way she had learned during recent training. She didn't summon her energy. She invited it. Not a blaze, a breath. Light formed beneath her skin, faint and steady. She pressed her palm to the console's emitter plate. The ship systems channeled her glow, not amplifying it, but shaping it into a soft pulse directed outward into the nebula. Data monitored, energy output stable, projecting a harmonic resonance at low frequency, Carol whispered, like addressing a frightened creature. We're here. Slow down. Breathe. The nebula responded. Gas swirls tightened into filament shapes, drawn toward the ship as if curious. Ionized dust glowed brighter, creating faint star-like flutters. Then something surged. A wave of photonic pressure slammed toward the Enterprise. Worf barked. Shields up, Picard shouted. Brace! The shields flared blue as the wave impacted. Consoles flickered. Panels rattled. The ship lurched slightly, not harmed, just overwhelmed by the intensity of the response. Riker held the railing. Was that an attack? Carol shook her head. No, that was panic. I startled them. Data sensors recalibrated. The source is collapsing. They are not attacking. They are losing cohesion. Their energy structure is destabilizing. If unregulated, they may dissipate entirely, Carol whispered. That's not a life trying to kill us. That's a life dying. Picard's voice lowered, full of quiet urgency. Options? Carol turned to him. Let me go there, not to fight, to stabilize them. Worf stepped forward. That area is unstable. The radiation fields alone. Carol cut him off gently. I can withstand it better than you. You know that. Crusher's voice returned over calm, tense. Better doesn't mean safe. Carol, you only recently gained control. Throwing yourself into a collapsing energy mass could reverse everything you've learned. You could destabilize too. Carol breathed deeply. If they burn out alone, what's the point of all this control I'm learning? This is exactly why I need it. Not to fight, to keep someone else from exploding. Crusher tried again. And if they're nothing like you? Carol looked straight at Picard. Then I'll learn, and maybe they will too. Silence, heavy, full of implications. Picard finally spoke, not as a commander giving orders, but as someone placing trust. You will not go alone. Carol blinked. You mean send a team? Radiation could kill them. Picard nodded toward the science console. Mr. Data will accompany you. His presence will not be affected by radiation, and you may require a stabilizing intellectual counterpart, not just emotional connection. Carol considered. Data looked at her expectantly. She nodded slowly. Okay, we do this together. Picard raised his hand. Prepare them for protected transport. Limited range. Maintain lock at all times. Worf's voice hardened with protective intensity. I will monitor the locks myself. Carol almost smiled. Thank you, Worf replied simply. Do not make me regret it. As Carol left the bridge with Data, the nebula pulsed again, softer this time, like a frightened creature waiting to see if someone would return. Carol whispered under her breath, not for Data or the crew, but for the being ahead. I know what it's like to burn alone. Let's see if we can do this differently. The transporter room awaited, and somewhere in the nebula, so did a life made of light, fear, and potential. It was time to meet them. The transporter room hummed like a heart under strain. The steady thrum of the pad seemed louder than usual, or maybe it only felt that way to Carol as she stepped up onto the platform. Data joined her, his posture calm, movements precise, the embodiment of focus. Worf stood at the console, jaw set, eyes sharp, fingers poised to adjust transport lock settings at the first sign of instability. Worf spoke, voice low but firm. You understand your limits. If your cellular energy spikes beyond control, I will pull you out. No hesitation. Carol nodded. You won't have to. I'm not going in to fight. Worf's gaze softened for only a moment. Then do not forget what you have already won. Control is not surrender. It is strength. Carol breathed slowly, absorbing the reminder. She turned to Data. You ready? Data tilted his head. I lack the biological variables necessary to be unprepared. However, I acknowledge the emotional semantics of your question. Yes, I am ready. Carol smirked faintly. Good enough. The room lights dimmed slightly as Worf engaged the enhanced lock sequence. The transporter pad glowed. Carol felt her heartbeat sync with the machine as energy gathered around her form. Lock established, Worf announced. Energizing. The world dissolved into particles, and then light. Not the clean, uniform shimmer of a typical transport. This was chaotic radiance, as if the space around them was unable to decide what light should be. Color fractured and twisted, shapes flickered and stretched, and every photon felt a little too alive. They reformed in the heart of the nebula. It was like standing inside a sun that hadn't made up its mind. The gas clouds swirled in luminous tides, glowing and fading with uncertain rhythm. Electric filaments stretched like nerves across the void. In the distance, something pulsed erratically, collapsing inward, then flaring outward with chaotic energy. Carol whispered, "That's not a star forming. That's a person failing." Data's tricorder whirred instantly. Analysis confirms the presence of an energy-based organism. Composition suggests photonic ion matter with quantum instability. Their structure is deteriorating rapidly. If disintegration completes, the resulting burst could trigger full-chain ignition in the surrounding stellar nursery. Carol stared in horror. They'll blow the whole cluster. Data nodded. And countless future star systems with it. Carol stepped forward instinctively, but the light surged violently as if recoiling from her presence. She froze. Her own glow had begun to pulse in response, her cells reacting automatically to the volatile energy environment. Control, Carol told herself. Not power, control. Data raised his tricorder, projecting a low harmonic field. The environment stabilized slightly, the chaotic pulses slowing as if curious about the new frequency. Data continued adjusting. The organism is responding to structured vibrations. They are attempting to synchronize, but their instability prevents full cohesion. Carol exhaled softly. They're trying to match something, but don't know how. Data looked at her. Perhaps we can provide a stable reference for them to align with, much like how you stabilized your own energy output after your arrival. Carol nodded. But I have to stay calm. If I flare, they flare. If I panic, they panic. If I burn, Data finished for her. They burn everything, she smirked. Exactly, no pressure. Another pulse erupted from the organism, brighter, hotter, unstable. It expanded like a scream, lashing out toward them. In a flash, Carol's instincts kicked in. Her body ignited in radiant gold, not explosive, not wild, but a steady, contained flame. She held her ground and let the blast wash over her. Her energy deflected it without retaliation. Carol whispered, "Hey, easy. You don't need to match me perfectly. Just follow." Her glow softened, pulsing in measured breaths. Data adjusted the harmonic frequency to match her rhythm. The violent energy spikes lessened. The clouds around them swirled in slow arcs, as though turning to listen. Carol stepped forward, slowly, one pulse at a time, matching that flickering chaos ahead with patient intervals. She could feel the fear inside that light. Not thought, not words, just instinct, pain, confusion, a need to exist without knowing how. Carol murmured instinctively, "I know what it's like, being more than you can handle." The unstable energy being flared again, this time not violent, but desperate. Carol extended her hand toward the pulsing core, not to seize, not to impose, to meet. Her energy touched the edge of its chaotic surface. It recoiled, then surged forward, clinging to her steady frequency like someone grasping a ledge. Data's tricorder beeped sharply. Rapid stabilization detected. They are absorbing your vibrational pattern. You must maintain constant control. Carol closed her eyes, breathing slowly, letting her power flow. Not out, not in, just through her. She held the line between presence and overwhelm. The organism settled. Light condensed into a form. Not humanoid, not defined, more like a cluster of solar plasma containing instinct and potential. It pulsed gently, now mirroring her rhythm. Carol opened her eyes and whispered, "That's it. You're okay. You're not alone." The entire nebula shifted. The chaotic storm softened. Protostars brightened instead of quaking under the tension. It was like the environment itself exhaled. Data scanned. Stabilization at 60%. Catastrophic ignition, likelihood reduced to negligible levels. Carol kept her hand extended, her glow steady. The organism floated closer, its surface rippling with curiosity. It brushed her fingers, emitting a sound like a faint harmonic chord. It wasn't language, but it was trust. Worf's voice broke in over their comms, strained. Transport window closing. Radiation spike imminent. Extraction required immediately. Data turned to Carol. "We must depart." Carol nodded, but didn't pull away from the being immediately. She waited until its glow remained stable without her influence. Then she lowered her hand. "Stay here, slowly, learn by yourself. We will come back. You're safe." The organism pulsed once in acknowledgement, then drifted gradually toward a calmer region of the nebula. Data signaled. 2 to beam up. The nebula grew distant as they dissolved into particles. They rematerialized on the transporter pad. Worf immediately locked down the room, shielding systems humming. Carol's glow faded gently. She looked exhausted, but triumphant. Worf scanned her quickly. No destabilization. Energy readings within safe parameters. Crusher rushed in, tricorder ready. "Carol, are you—" Carol cut her off with a tired smile. "Still me, just less crispy this time." Crusher sighed in relief. "Don't scare me like that." Carol laughed softly. "Wasn't planning to." Picard's voice came over calm. "Bridge to transporter room. Report," Data answered. "The organism has stabilized. Catastrophic threat averted. Further observation recommended," Picard replied, his voice noticeably warmer. "Excellent work. Debrief in 10 minutes." Carol stepped off the pad. Her legs trembled slightly, and Data caught her arm, steadying her with effortless calm. She looked up at him. Did they feel me helping?" Data considered. "While I cannot interpret emotional perception in photonic organisms, it appears they recognized you as a stabilizing influence rather than a threat." Carol smiled faintly. "A teacher, not a weapon." Data nodded. "Or perhaps a guide." Carol breathed in the air of the ship. Warm, artificial, safe. She whispered to herself, "Control isn't a leash, it's a lifeline." And somewhere in the nebula, a being of light pulsed gently, alive because she hadn't exploded, hadn't attacked, hadn't dominated. She had listened. The debrief wasn't tense. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't even particularly formal. Picard stood at the head of the table, hands lightly clasped, not as though he was preparing to deliver orders, but as though he was preparing to understand something new. Data sat with perfect posture. Crusher leaned back slightly, studying Carol from across the table with clinical curiosity mixed with obvious pride. Riker lounged with his usual casual attentiveness, ready to jump in if humor or disaster broke loose. Worf sat stiff, arms crossed, guarded expression, betraying deep investment behind the stoicism. Carol sat in the middle, feeling like someone being interviewed for a job she didn't apply for and wasn't sure she wanted. Picard began without ceremony. "You stabilized an organism of unknown origin through direct resonance matching." Carol shrugged. "I didn't exactly plan it. I just met it where it was." Data nodded. "Your energy fluctuations maintained a harmonic baseline while adjusting to the organism's instability. You did not enforce a standard. You offered one." Carol smirked. "That's a diplomatic way of saying I didn't blow anything up." Crusher smiled. "It's also a scientific way of saying you kept it alive." Riker raised a brow. "Which means we now have a new type of neighbor out there. One who might be a baby star god or a sentient light cloud. Let's hope it grows up friendly," Worf rumbled, tone serious. "Whatever it becomes, it will remember how it began, with guidance, not conflict." Carol looked at him, surprised by the sentiment. Worf rarely spoke softly. When he did, it carried weight. Picard clasped his hands behind his back. "Ms. Danvers, this event marks a shift, not in your power, but in your purpose aboard this vessel. You have demonstrated not only restraint, but leadership through influence." Carol raised both eyebrows. "Leadership? I'm not leading anything. I'm just helping when I'm needed." Picard shook his head gently. "Leadership is not about command. It is about direction. You provided a path when no one else understood the nature of the situation." Carol stared at him for a moment. Something about his tone unsettled her. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that made her feel seen deeply. Riker leaned forward, breaking the tension with an easy grin. "Plus, you didn't die. Always a big leadership plus." Carol chuckled. "I'll put that on my resume. Didn't die. Twice." Crusher spoke softly. "Carol, that creature responded to you because you've been where it was, overwhelmed by what you are. You knew how to speak without words. That wasn't force. That was empathy." Carol looked down at the table, fingers tracing a faint scratch in the polished surface. Empathy. She had been called powerful her whole life. But empathy? That was new. She wasn't sure how to wear it. Picard continued. "We are proposing something, not a rank, not a mandate, a role. You would serve as a liaison for high-energy life forms and anomalous entities. those who cannot communicate through speech, politics, or fear. Carol blinked. Like a translator between energy beings and Starfleet? Data nodded. Precisely. Your understanding offers unique insight into communicating with non-verbal energy-based intelligences. Worf spoke next, blunt. You communicate through strength, but without aggression. That is rare. Carol frowned. You all think I'm ready for that? Crusher smiled. No one's ever ready. That's why we learn. Carol leaned back slowly. A liaison. Not a soldier, not a weapon, not a savior. A bridge. She whispered the word under her breath. A bridge. The room waited for her response. She looked around at the crew, these people who fought with words and patience more than fists and explosions, who navigated conflict not by surviving it, but by preventing it, who refused to define her by the damage she could cause. She finally nodded. All right, I'll try, but no promises I'll always get it right. Picard bowed his head slightly, satisfied. No one ever does. That is why we persist. The meeting dispersed, and Carol lingered in the corridor afterward, mind buzzing with the weight of the offer. A bridge. It didn't sound heroic. It didn't sound dramatic. It sounded necessary. She walked slowly toward the observation deck. Stars streaked beyond the window, glittering like powder on velvet. She pressed her palm to the glass, faint light pulsing under her skin, matching the rhythm she'd used to calm the organism in the nebula. The door slid open behind her. She didn't turn. She knew who it was by the quiet presence alone. Worf. He approached, stopping a respectful distance away. You are unsettled, Carol scoffed softly. Can you read minds now? Worf shook his head. I read posture. Yours is conflicted, she sighed. This role they want me to take. It's not what I trained for. It's not what I was made for, Worf replied calmly. And what you were made for no longer matters. Only what you choose. Carol turned to him slowly. You make that sound simple. Worf met her gaze with unflinching certainty. It is not simple. It is necessary. She studied him for a moment. Klingons choose everything with conviction. Humans doubt. Kree follow orders. She wasn't fully any of those. She was something in between. Maybe that made her more flexible or more lost. She asked quietly, Do you think I can do this the right way? Worf answered without hesitation. There is no right way, only honorable intent. You have that. Carol smiled softly. Thanks. That means more than you know. Worf nodded once and exited. His presence left a kind of calm behind. Carol turned back to the stars. She wasn't being pointed at a war. She wasn't being unleashed. She was being asked to understand, to translate, to connect, to choose. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't reacting to danger. She was building something. Her glow flickered gently, like a lamp in a dark room. Not blinding, not overwhelming, steady, a bridge of light. Carol's new role didn't begin with a ceremony, a uniform change, or even an official announcement. It began with data, endless data. She found herself seated in the science lab, surrounded by holographic displays, waves of light patterns suspended in the air, pulses of photonic frequency, subspace distortions, luminal variations from the being they'd encountered in the nebula, each one a sentence, maybe a paragraph, of a language no universal translator could decode. Data stood beside her, adjusting sensor parameters. These readings were collected after your departure from the stellar nursery. The organism appears to have maintained stability. It has begun emitting periodic resonance signals. Carol raised an eyebrow. Like talking? Data nodded. Possibly, or simply expressing energetically. Communication need not be intentional to convey information. Carol smirked. So, a baby babbling in the cosmic crib. Data blinked. If that metaphor assists your comprehension, yes. Carol rolled her eyes. It wasn't a metaphor, just a joke. Data blinked again. I will record that distinction. She relaxed slightly. Working with Data was grounding. He treated everything as a puzzle, not a crisis. For someone whose entire life had been crises, puzzles felt like oxygen. She tapped one of the holographic waveforms, letting her own energy lightly sink to it. The waveform steadied in response, then shifted slightly upward. Carol frowned. Data observed. You altered the frequency merely by interacting. This suggests the organism might adapt to contact. It may imprint on external energy sources. Carol looked uneasy. Imprinting, as in bonding? Crusher's voice chimed in through the lab comm. Think of it like a newborn recognizing comfort. The being stabilizes when it senses your controlled output. You're an anchor. Carol leaned back in her chair. An anchor. Great. So now I'm a cosmic babysitter. Crusher appeared in person a moment later, entering with a data card in hand. Not babysitter. Mentor. There's a difference. Carol didn't answer immediately. She didn't like the idea of someone or something depending on her. She'd spent years being depended on, and usually it ended with devastation or exhaustion. She was strong enough to survive it, but the scars were real. Crusher studied her silently, reading her expression the way only a doctor or a mother could. You're not required to raise it, Carol. Only help it become what it already is, safely. Carol tilted her head. That sounds like parenting. Crusher smiled gently. Good parenting, yes. Carol exhaled sharply with a dry laugh. Doctor, you're terrifying sometimes. Crusher patted her shoulder. Get used to it. As Crusher left, Data displayed a new overlay. This one showing the being's growing stability curve. It is beginning to maintain its own resonance independent of you. This is a sign of autonomy. You are not shaping it, only guiding it to coherence. Carol's chest eased at that. Good. I don't want a sidekick made of starlight. Worf entered the lab then, as if summoned by the word sidekick. He carried a tactical slate under his arm. Danvers. A moment. Carol arched an eyebrow. Let me guess. The Starlight baby is now a threat to Klingon honor? Worf ignored the joke with perfect seriousness. The next diplomatic assignment has been confirmed. You are requested to attend. Carol blinked. Requested? By who? Worf handed her the slate. She read the header. Synergin Trade Accord Mediation. Guests, Federation, Vulcan Council, Tholian Delegate. Carol squinted. Tholian Delegate? Aren't they crystalline heat beings who burn through most environments? Worf grunted. Correct. Their communication is based on temperature shifts and tension pulses, not sound. They find humanoid speech inefficient and often insulting. Many consider them impossible to negotiate with. Carol frowned. And I'm supposed to help? How? Worf crossed his arms. You will not negotiate. You will sense. Carol stared. Sense what? Worf leaned closer. Their emotional temperature responses are volatile. You can detect heat patterns and energy signatures. You can anticipate aggression or misunderstanding before it occurs. Carol blinked. You're saying I'll be a mood detector? Worf nodded, completely straight-faced. Yes, you will detect moods. Carol sighed. I go from fighting cosmic monsters to being a diplomatic thermostat. Worf's eyes narrowed. Control of environment is control of battle. Negotiation is war without weapons. Carol paused, then nodded slowly. Okay, when you say it like that, it's actually kind of badass. Worf grunted approvingly. Then prepare. We depart in 8 days. 8 days. 8 days until she stood in a room with beings made of burning crystal, who communicated through heat and precision. 8 days until she tested not her strength, but her awareness. For the next week, Carol trained, not physically, but perceptually. Data created sensory simulations of temperature fluctuations, showing her how emotional changes in Tholian patterns translated to aggression, inquiry, cooperation, suspicion. Carol had to learn to sense the difference between hostile heat and curious heat, between defensive spike and territorial warning, between insult and interest, cruiser-level diplomacy, with murder stares made of lava. On the 7th day, she sat once more in quiet meditation. She held her hand in front of her, letting energy flicker faintly. She had grown used to the new question she asked herself every time she touched her power. Am I responding or reacting? Responding was intention. Reacting was instinct. She was learning the difference. On the 8th day, as the Enterprise approached the Synergen Accord summit, Picard called her to the bridge. He spoke calmly, as always. Ms. Danvers, are you prepared? Carol inhaled lightly. I'm not sure, but I'm ready to learn. Picard smiled just enough to catch the room's light. Then you are prepared. The view screen lit up as a fiery crystalline silhouette approached the station. The first Tholian delegate had arrived. Carol's glow dimmed, not out of fear, but respect. She whispered to herself, one last reminder. Be a bridge, not a blast. The Synergen Accord Summit wasn't held on a planet. It was held on a starship hybrid facility, a neutral floating citadel at the edge of a quiet binary system. The structure resembled a circular ring anchored to a central spire, rotating slowly to simulate gravity. Docking corridors extended like branches for visiting vessels. The Enterprise approached with a slow, respectful glide. Carol watched from the bridge as a crystalline vessel docked on the opposite side of the station. It resembled a shard of glass set on fire, its hull pulsing with radiant heat that rippled through space like a silent scream. Riker muttered, "That's one beautiful nightmare." Worf's tone was reverent. Tholian vessels are not nightmares. They are declarations. Picard maintained his poised calm. Then let us respond with civility, not fear. Carol stood beside him, feeling the waves of energy radiating from the Tholian ship. It wasn't chaotic like the being in the nebula. It was structured, intentional, focused. She whispered quietly, "They're not angry, they're proud." Worf nodded once, as if only a warrior would understand pride that hot. Diplomatic teams gathered at the airlock. Picard led the delegation, flanked by Riker and a Vulcan ambassador named Tavarin. Carol walked slightly behind them, not a guard, not a weapon, a witness, a translator without words. The airlock hissed open with a shimmer of heat. The stream of air felt like stepping into a sauna. Then the Tholian delegate emerged. Its body was fashion and fire, faceted crystalline limbs shifting in angles that caught light and bent it into shimmering patterns of color. Its voice emerged as vibrating heat waves, projected as tonal resonance rather than speech. The station's translator interpreted in real time, but with heavy lag and awkward phrasing. "We acknowledge the arrival of the warm-blooded coalition." Carol winced. Warm-blooded coalition? That sounded like an insult wearing diplomacy's shoes. Picard, unbothered, bowed slightly. "We come in pursuit of mutual understanding, honored guest of the Tholian assembly. The Tholian pulsed with a burst of orange heat, and the translator sputtered. Your approach displays low-quantity elegance. Acceptable, Carol whispered quietly. That means respectful by their standards. Tevarin, the Vulcan ambassador, raised an eyebrow. A curious metric for diplomacy. Carol shrugged. They respect understatement. Big gestures are seen as desperate. Picard continued, voice composed. May our intentions be clear through collaboration, not display. Another orange pulse. The translator attempted to keep up. Your restraint is acknowledged. Proceed into the chamber of agreement. The group walked through a long corridor filled with heat-dissipating shielding. Carol felt her powers thrum in subtle reaction, like they wanted to answer the warmth, but she kept her glow low and steady. She wasn't here to flare. The chamber was an oval room with a temperature gradient floor. Zones of varying warmth signified conversational stances. Carol could read the thermal diplomacy like a map. Where someone stood meant what they meant. The Tholian delegate moved to a zone of moderate heat, not too hot, not icy, a neutral stance. Carol subtly touched Picard's sleeve before he stepped further. Middle left, she whispered. That's where they want you. Moving too close means aggression. Too far means disrespect. Picard adjusted his step, letting Carol's quiet guidance redirect his position. The Tholian's body flickered approvingly. Negotiations began, not with requests, not with complaints, but with temperature shifts and phrasing as delicate as glass threads. Tevarin presented resource flow projections. Riker highlighted trade route logistics. The Tholian responded through pulses of structured heat. Anything too emotional? Carol read it instantly. When the Tholian's temperature spiked sharp amber, she whispered to the team. They see the trade imbalance as an insult, a matter of pride. Picard rephrased, removing implications of blame. The Tholian cooled. Later, when Tevarin suggested equal resource distribution without priority provisions, the Tholian temperature dropped abruptly. Cold hostility. Carol adjusted again. They see balance as deference. You need to emphasize mutual benefit without implication of weakness. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, the conversation shifted from tension to respect. Hours passed. Temperature fluctuations smoothed. The Tholian's motions became less fragmented. Riker leaned toward Carol and whispered, "You're like a diplomat's heat lamp," Carol whispered back. "You're like a diplomat's bad metaphor." Riker grinned. "I'll take it." Finally, the Tholian moved toward a sector of warm neutrality, an invitation to conclude. Picard spoke with quiet gravity. "May our accords preserve strength and ensure prosperity without discord." The Tholian pulsed with a steady glow. The translator rendered, "Your proposition is recognized as advantageous." Agreement formed. Carol smiled slightly. That was as close as a Tholian got to thumbs up and applause. The session ended with no signatures yet, only a mutual vow to proceed with formal drafting. Not rushed, not demanded, just earned. As they departed, the Tholian emissary paused, turning toward Carol. Its frequency shifted, not toward Picard, but toward her. A direct pulse. Carol instinctively drew in a slow breath. She felt the tone more than heard it, warm, steady, curious. The translator chirped, words delayed. "Do you burn by choice or condition?" Carol hesitated, then answered cautiously. "By choice now." The Tholian pulsed brighter, almost mirrored her glow. "Then you are honored among those who shape heat. We acknowledge your fire." Carol blinked, stunned. Worf's expression tightened into the Klingon equivalent of impressed. Picard bowed slightly, letting Carol be the focal point. She returned a polite nod to the Tholian. As they left the chamber, Riker whisper-smirked. "So, did you just get a compliment or a marriage proposal?" Carol groaned. "Please don't start rumors about me marrying lava crabs," Worf corrected seriously. "Tholians are not crabs. They are warriors of crystalline order." Carol rolled her eyes. "Great. Next negotiation, I'll insult their honor by mislabeling their anatomy." Picard allowed himself a rare chuckle. "Let us refrain from any anatomical discussions unless required by diplomacy." Carol walked with them back toward the docking corridor, and for the first time, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not pride, not victory, fluency. She was learning not just language or power control, but how to exist without being defined by force. This mission hadn't asked for her strength. It had asked for her presence, and she had given it without fear. She whispered to herself as they boarded the Enterprise again. "A bridge doesn't burn. It carries." The Enterprise glided away from the summit facility, its hull catching faint reflections of the Tholian vessel's crystalline glow. Negotiations were not finished, but they had begun without conflict, something the Federation considered a success. Carol stood in the observation lounge again, watching as the Tholian ship's light disappeared into the void. She expected a feeling of relief, maybe triumph. Instead, she felt something quieter. She'd been listened to, not for her strength, not for her past, not for the threat she could pose, but for understanding. She didn't realize how heavy it had been to always be noticed but never heard. The door slid open. This time, it wasn't Worf. It wasn't Data. It was Picard. Carol didn't face him. They stood in silence for a moment, watching faint particles streak by like frozen rain. Picard spoke gently, as though he didn't want to break the calm. "I wanted to thank you, Ms. Danvers. Today's outcome would not have been possible without your presence." Carol responded with a shrug. "I just told you where to stand." Picard stepped beside her. "Diplomacy often begins with where one stands, physically and philosophically." She laughed softly. "You always talk like you swallowed a book." Picard smiled at the stars. "And you speak like someone who didn't have time to finish one, but survived a chapter no one else could read." The remark landed deeper than he intended. Carol glanced at him, eyes narrowing slightly, not offended, but curious. "You think I've been fighting too long to see the value in peace?" Picard's tone deepened, warm but careful. "I think you've mistaken rest for weakness, and in your world, perhaps it was. But here, rest is preparation, patience is strategy, peace is a tactic." Carol turned fully now. "A tactic?" Picard nodded. "You fought to survive. We negotiate to prevent more fighting. Both are necessary. Neither is lesser." Carol absorbed the words slowly. In her universe, every calm moment was simply the quiet before another war. She'd learned to fear silence. But here, silence wasn't warning. It was space to choose. She asked quietly, "So, what if I mess up? What if I give the wrong advice and we end up at war anyway?" Picard replied without hesitation. "Then we learn from it together. That is what crews are for." The simplicity of his answer was disarming. Carol blinked, then exhaled with unexpected ease. She shifted the conversation. "What's next for the negotiations?" Before Picard could answer, Data's voice came through the comm. "Captain, We are receiving a priority signal from Starfleet Command. Admiral Nechayev requests immediate communication. Picard tapped his comm badge. On my way. Ms. Danvers, if you wish, you may join us. I have a feeling this involves you. Carol's stomach tightened. Starfleet Command? Great. She was finally feeling comfortable, and now someone high-ranking would call her a liability. She followed Picard to the bridge. The main screen lit up with the stern, sharp eyes of Admiral Alina Nechayev, the woman whose reputation could bend steel. She wasted no time. Captain Picard, I've reviewed your report. The situation with the Tholians is delicate. Your success is noted. However, the one-word dagger. Carol braced for impact. Nechayev continued. This emerging field of energy-based diplomacy requires specialized oversight. Starfleet Command is authorizing the creation of a new liaison division, and we require a field specialist, Riker muttered under his breath. Oh no, Worf nodded as if sensing a battle about to begin. Crusher crossed her arms. Data tilted his head. Picard remained impassive. Carol waited for the blow. Nechayev concluded crisply. Carol Danvers is hereby requested to serve provisionally as Starfleet's first energy-based interlife consultant, pending her willingness to cooperate. She will remain aboard the Enterprise as her operational base. Carol blinked. Requested, not ordered. Willingness to cooperate. Those words mattered in Starfleet. They meant choice. Picard responded evenly. Ms. Danvers has been an asset to this crew. We support her candidacy, if she desires the role. Nechayev's icy eyes focused directly on Carol. Ms. Danvers, this proposal is not simply tactical, it is historic. But I will not force someone into diplomacy who relies on brute instinct. The Federation needs more than strength. It needs decision-makers who can build trust between species with volatile capabilities. Carol swallowed. For a moment, she heard old versions of herself. The soldier, the weapon, the person commanded into roles without consent. She thought she would flinch at being asked again to serve. But no one was demanding anything. They were asking. Carol breathed out slowly. I'll do it. On one condition. Nechayev raised an eyebrow. Name it. Carol lifted her chin slightly. I'm not a soldier in this. I'm not on call to punch my way out of diplomacy if things go wrong. I'm here to build something, not break it. Nechayev stared at her for a long, tense moment, then nodded. Agreed. The channel closed. Riker let out a breath. Well, no pressure, Worf countered. Pressure builds diamonds, Carol shrugged. Diamonds break too. The point is what they do before they crack. Picard smiled slightly, spoken like someone ready to lead. Carol shook her head. No, like someone ready to help. Later, alone again at the viewport, she finally let the moment settle into her bones. She wasn't obeying orders. She wasn't reacting. She wasn't even saving anyone. She was being trusted to build something new. She whispered to herself, a quiet promise. No more burning alone for anyone. Outside, a distant star flared, newborn and molten, like a light learning how to exist. And Carol Danvers watched it, not as a threat, not as a sentinel, but as its closest peer. Starfleet didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, Carol's provisional status as an interlife consultant was formalized in a digital packet of guidelines, scientific briefs, and diplomatic protocols. Most people would have expected a uniform or a badge. Instead, Carol received something far more intimidating. Homework. A stack of data slates thicker than a warp core manual arrived at her quarters with a polite message from Data. Supplemental material to assist in the comprehension of interspecies energetic communication. She flipped one open. Equations, thermal correlation charts, social patterns mapped as frequency waves, treaties phrased as resonance graphs rather than language. Carol stared at the screen, then sighed. You'd think saving a star would be harder than reading a textbook. Someone chuckled behind her. She turned. Geordie leaned in the doorway, visor glimmering. Trust me, plenty of us would rather face a rogue star than a bureaucracy lecture. Carol laughed. That's comforting. Thanks. Geordie stepped inside. I heard you got promoted to cosmic mediator. Congratulations. Carol frowned. It's provisional, and it feels weird. Geordie sat on her desk, arms crossed casually. Let me guess, even your good news feels like responsibility? Carol blinked. Yeah, how'd you know? Geordie shrugged. I've seen it before. People who are used to being needed don't always know what to do when they're wanted. The words hit her deeper than expected. Carol rested her elbows on her knees, thinking. Before she could reply, the comm crackled. Bridge to Danvers. We're approaching a subspace relay node for inspection. Captain requests your presence. Carol stood. Guess the galaxy isn't giving me time to overthink. Geordie smiled. It never does. Come on. They arrived on the bridge. The subspace relay appeared on the main screen. Small, unassuming, rotating gently between star systems. A worker drone floated near its surface. Routine maintenance. Nothing unusual. Carol frowned. So, what do you need me for? Data responded. The node's transmissions have been fluctuating in a non-random photonic pattern, similar to stress pulses. Carol blinked. Stress? Relays don't get stressed, Worf corrected bluntly. This one is malfunctioning, irregularly. Riker turned from the helm. The last relay that acted irregularly nearly started a diplomatic war. Picard stepped forward. That is precisely why we are taking no chances. Ms. Danvers, we'd like your assessment before we allow technicians to approach. Carol nodded. I'll try. The Enterprise maintained a cautious distance. Carol stood in front of the view screen, narrowing her eyes, letting her senses focus, not outward, but inward. Her glow remained subtle, not flaring, just listening. The relay pulsed faintly, too faint for most sensors, but Carol recognized it, like a tone slightly out of harmony with itself, a shaky rhythm, a repeating beat with no center. She whispered, "It's not a creature, but it's scared." Riker turned sharply. "A relay is scared?" Carol gestured with frustration. "Not literally scared. It's reacting like something that's being overloaded, like it's receiving too much from somewhere, or being forced to send more than it's built for." Data checked readings rapidly, confirmed. The relay is being pushed beyond operational parameters. Transmission flux suggests forced amplification. Worf's eyes narrowed. Sabotage? Picard remained calm. Or misuse. Carol shook her head. Overuse. Someone's making it push messages faster than it can handle. If this keeps up, it doesn't explode. It collapses and tears open subspace around it. Riker muttered. Like a popped balloon between galaxies. Data nodded, resulting in a communication dead zone that could disrupt Federation Talax trade and other neighboring exchanges. Picard frowned. Who would push a relay that hard? Carol answered immediately. Someone desperate to send something, or someone trying to hide from someone else. Data pulled up transmission logs. The relay is overloaded, sending encrypted short bursts. Coordinates unknown. Carol leaned closer. What if it's trying to warn someone? Worf stepped forward, or call for help. Picard looked at Carol. Can you synchronize with it the way you did with the Nebula entity? Carol hesitated. It's not alive. If I try to sink, I could break it faster. But, she thought, then nodded. I can stabilize it by feeding it energy, just enough to give it breathing room, let it send without cracking. Picard raised an eyebrow. A relay with breathing room? Carol shrugged. Works on people, might work on tech. Geordi smirked. Engineering rule number 1. Everything works better when it thinks you care. Picard nodded. Proceed. Carefully. Carol placed her hand over a console interface. She focused on emitting a slow, stable pulse, not pushing the relay, not stealing power, just bracing it, like lending muscle to someone who's falling without carrying them. The relay steadied. The signal burst through clearly for the first time. Riker leaned forward. We're receiving a message. The screen shifted to encoded text, then decrypted into a single repeating message. Beware the star that is not a star. The bridge fell silent. Worf spoke first. A threat, data added, or a warning. Carol frowned, whispering more to herself than anyone else. The star that is not a star. Picard read the message again, eyes narrowing. It feels familiar. Carol nodded slowly. It should. That's the same language the being in the nebula tried to use. Energy patterns. Non-verbal messaging. Crusher's voice crackled through comms from sickbay. Captain, I've analyzed Carol's cellular readings after the nebula encounter. Her energy signature changed. She's tuned into something, or something tuned into her. Carol's pulse quickened. You're saying I didn't just stabilize it. It stabilized me, Crusher replied gravely. And now you're receiving the same warnings it would have sent if it could speak. Carol stared at the stars. Somewhere, a danger was moving. Something powerful, something disguised, something that consumed stars without being one. The creature they trapped? No, something else. Picard stepped closer. Ms. Danvers, does this warning feel like a call for help or a call to run? Carol closed her eyes. Her glow flickered once, like a small flame sensing wind. Then she answered softly. Neither. It's a call to prepare. The relay flickered again. The star that is not a star comes hungry. Carol opened her eyes, steady now. The crew stared. Fear rose. Carol didn't let it spread. Not panic. Preparation. She whispered calmly. Then let's find it before it finds anything else. Picard nodded. Set a course. The chase had begun. The bridge felt colder, even though the temperature never changed. The warning lingered on the view screen like a ghost. The star that is not a star comes hungry. Everyone stood in tense silence. Not because they didn't know what it meant, but because it echoed something too familiar. The last creature they'd encountered devoured energy. But that one hadn't disguised itself. It came as a predator, not a phantom. This message implied something else, a mimic, a feeder hiding in plain sight. Picard walked forward, voice low, steady, anchoring. Ms. Danvers, you've sensed something akin to this. What does your instinct tell you? Carol didn't answer right away. She let her vision soften, not focusing on any one panel or star. She searched the feeling, the message, the rhythm she'd felt from the unstable being in the nebula. This was similar, but not the same. She finally spoke. That creature we trapped? It didn't hide. It didn't need to. Hunger was its nature. But this feels like something learned, something aware of being hunted, or of hunting without being noticed. Worf's tone was grim. A predator that stalks systems quietly. A strategic hunger. Carol nodded. Or something reacting to predators like itself, changing to survive. Data tapped the console. The transmission's origin remains concealed. Whoever sent it masked their coordinates using the relay's overload. They did not want to be traced. Riker frowned. So someone risked ripping open subspace just to send this message? Picard turned. Which means whatever this warning concerns is dangerous enough to justify the risk. Geordi added. Someone out there burned through a relay to scream into the void. And they didn't ask for rescue. They told us to beware. Carol's pulse thrummed with electric tension. She looked out at the stars. I think they don't believe they can be saved, only that we might avoid what's coming. Crusher entered the bridge, her face pale. If the warning came in the same energetic language as the nebula being, then the sender might be a photonic life form too, one that encountered this star mimic. Carol's jaw tightened. They survived long enough to warn us. That's something, Worf asked. Where do we search? Data answered. We analyze stars that exhibit anomalous behavior inconsistent with stellar life cycle patterns. Energy excess or deficit without physical explanation, Carol added instinctively. They'll be hungry, but quiet, feeding slowly, not violently, to avoid detection. Picard nodded. Then we begin with subtle anomalies. Sensors scanned the surrounding sectors. Dozens, hundreds, too many. Then Data narrowed the list based on Carol's input. Stars with energy irregularities, but no visible decay, as though something drained them gently without damage in structure. The list decreased. Geordi refined it again, filtering by electromagnetic resonance signatures unlikely to occur naturally. The list shrank. Carol walked closer to the view screen, staring at the remaining candidates. 3 stars, widely separated, but each glowing with just slightly too much uniformity, too little variance. They looked stable, too stable. Carol pointed. That one. The screen zoomed in. A yellow-white star near an uninhabited system. Perfectly typical, perfectly ordinary. Too ordinary. Riker frowned. That star looks normal, Carol spoke softly. A predator hiding in plain sight looks like safety, until you're close enough to be eaten. Picard set his jaw. Helm, set course. Maximum warp. Maintain distance upon arrival. We observe before we act, Worf muttered. Perhaps it is observing us already. Carol's glow flickered faintly, instinctively. She whispered, Let it. We're not prey if we don't behave like prey. Picard nodded in agreement. Wise words. The Enterprise accelerated into warp. As the stars streaked, the tension on the bridge transformed. Fear began shifting into focus, into readiness. They weren't blindsided this time. They weren't stumbling into the unknown. They were approaching it deliberately. As the warp field shimmered around them, Crusher rested a hand on Carol's shoulder. You don't have to face this alone. Carol smiled weakly. That's the point. None of us do. Minutes later, sensors pinged. They had arrived at the target system. The star looked like every other G-type main sequence beacon. Bright, quiet, steady, too steady. Carol felt it deep inside her bones. A wrongness hidden beneath perfection. A heartbeat with no variation. A smell of cleanliness that masked rot. The star wasn't alive, but something inside it was. Carol whispered, It's feeding, slow, like sipping, not swallowing. Data confirmed. Energy extraction detected. Something is drawing power from the star's core, but there is no external device or physical structure. Geordi stared at the readings. The drain signature is internal. Whatever's feeding is inside the star itself. Worf's voice was a low growl. A parasite. Carol shook her head. No, a tenant, one that chose the star like a home. The star pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly. Carol's breath hitched. It knows we're here. The lights on the bridge dimmed for a second, just long enough for something invisible to brush against the sensors like a whisper. Data's eyes widened. The star's corona is emitting directed electromagnetic patterns, not random, not natural. Picard leaned forward. It is communicating? Carol's voice shook, not with fear, but recognition. Not communicating, warning. The star's surface rippled like a reflection disturbed by something beneath it. Then a pulse washed over them, strong enough to make Carol's skin glow without her consent. Go. Another pulse snapped across sensors. It hunts, Riker whispered. The star itself is speaking? Carol shook her head. No, something inside it is screaming through it. The lights flickered again. Run. Carol straightened, eyes sharp. Somehow, the courage she'd learned on this ship steadied her voice. We don't run from warnings, we answer them. Picard nodded. Open a channel. Extend passive communication. Let them know we're here to listen. Data tapped controls. Channel open. Carol closed her eyes. Not flaring, not demanding, just listening. For a moment, the star fell silent. Then something answered. Not a message. A soundless scream of hunger echoing across space, deep and vast, too old to be reasoned with. Carol's eyes snapped open. We're not the ones it's after. It's looking for something else, something bigger, something brighter. Worf asked, what could be brighter than a star? Carol exhaled slowly. A whole cluster, a nebula forming, a birthplace of stars. Picard's voice lowered. A feast. Carol nodded. And if it finishes feeding here, it won't stop. It'll move on. Data concluded. This entity is not merely feeding to survive. It is consuming to multiply. Carol's voice dropped into a whisper, heavy with dread and resolve. Then we need to stop a star eater before it starts a brood. The bridge stood frozen. Picard didn't hesitate. Prepare for first contact protocol with a hostile photonic entity. Worf readied, tactical, data recalibrated sensors. Geordi rerouted power to shields. Crusher monitored Carol for cellular instability. Carol whispered to the star, barely audible. We hear you. We're here. And this time, we're not alone. The hunt had become a rescue. A universe-spanning predator was awakening. And the Enterprise had arrived before its first feast.